All right. So today we're going to talk about the Kelp highway hypothesis yet again. But this time, unlike I feel is generally the theme, is the Kelp highway hypothesis is used to somehow navigate around the ice in the north and the possibility that the land was impassable. My thinking also was, why do we just assume that everyone was able just to walk all the way down to, Argentina or whatever, Chile, all the way down to the bottom of South America? And so my question was, was it that passable? And when I first looked at the Darien Gap and the fact that they can't build a road even through there today, and how almost without a boat, it's almost impassable, because even if you walk some of it, there's some parts where it's flooded, there's marshes, or there's fast running rivers that if you didn't have a canoe, you're probably going to die, or it would be almost impassable. So then I was thinking, so maybe had to be boats, but then I, of course, just people know, I don't do the Graham Hancock thing and have a fixed idea and demand for 30 years, unchanging to evidence, that I stick with the theory. My thinking is, what do I think is possible? My first thought was, of course, the Kelp highway hypothesis makes sense. They went all the way down with boats to South America. Bam, that's it. But then I learned more about the Darien Gap and the fact we can't even hardly get through there today very easy without death. And maybe that didn't happen. The walking, maybe the boats is literally, but then, which we're going to watch the video, finding out, but the land was different back. One part of this, the flat sea floor was available to walk, so they could have just walked without going through the Darien Gap. And so my thinking kind of like was going bing bong, back and forth. But I find that, to me, even though I didn't have a fixed idea, I kept moving around to what I was seeing or thinking about the evidence available. I find that to be a better way. It's better not to be so fixed like Graham Hancock and then demand that everything has to fit this. And if it doesn't, you just reject the evidence and go with your theory. No.
Yeah, it's not a good approach using Graham's method, because what's going to happen is you're going to end up becoming so attached to that theory that you're going to end up cherry picking evidence to fit it instead of looking at the whole picture.
Well, right. And we could cherry pick and say, the Darien is so hard to pass and the boats is just the easiest way to explain it. And the Kelp does go down there. We could easily just stick to that. But then when I looked at, but the land was different and walking wasn't an impossibility. And we don't have any evidence of boats. We don't really have evidence of Adzes. We don't, yes, they could have done different kinds of boats, but once again, the evidence for that isn't in other words, there isn't rock art that's 12,000 years old of boats, and so there isn't this corpus of stuff to help us, feel more confident, just like it's still hard with the Pacific Northwest also. Anyways, we'll watch the video.
Until the Arc of Islands became a land bridge. An ice age lowered the sea level.
This exposed vast areas of the seafloor to become dry land, and our ancestors could simply walk as they dispersed without getting their feet wet.
I just wanted to get the main theme that, yes, they could have just walked.
It's important to keep the lower sea level in mind when talking about these early migrations. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. See, in the first map that I had done, I didn't show, because I didn't know, the map I got did not have lower sea levels for the area of, Panama touching, Colombia or South America. So I didn't know the Darien Gap had land. So my first thought, and where the DNA went, it seemed super reasonable just to say, okay, I agree with the hypothesis that they went all the way down there. I still agree they passed the north that way. They also went by land, but the guarantee that it has to be the southern route by boat also can be less evidenced. So that's why I made another map right here, as you see, and because I wanted to, get more evidence to. It wasn't that I was trying to, in a sense, prove a theory or debunk a theory. I wanted to know, as you already know, I told you before, I want to know what's true. So I try to gather as much of what is known to be possibly true and then try to come up with what I think.
No, that's a good way to approach the topic, because knowing that there was this much sea level, this much land exposed back then, it opens up a range of possibilities for how they traveled along the coastline. All the places they would have stopped at, gotten materials, maybe traveled inland to see what was there. And especially here around the Darien Gap, there's a lot more land even than I knew about.
Right, like you see down here, this other map I show.
Oh, yeah,
look at how much they literally could have just.
Yeah.
They don't even have to go inland.
No.
So that could have gone either the northern route or the southern route. So either way, it wasn't impassable. So that like I said, I had to update my thinking. Oh wow, okay. Which, like I said, I think it's important to do.
Oh no, it is if you want a better understanding of what was actually going on back then.
Right.
But even though it would have been easy to walk along the coast, presumably if there weren't like all the different plant life, wild animals, things like that, actually getting into and through the Darien Gap, that's still a huge challenge.
Oh yes, I do agree that that's still a challenge today. So we're going to get to that in a second. Go ahead and read what I wrote on this map here.
It is possible humans reached South America on foot rather than by boat, but boats are also a real possibility, and a combination of both is not out of the question. Due to lower sea levels and more exposed land during the Ice Age, humans may have reached South America on foot, bypassing the Darien Gap and using coastal routes rather than navigating the treacherous jungle interior. The Darien Gap is naturally treacherous: dense rainforest, swamps, and steep mountains, high-speed rivers, heavy rain that leads to flooding, deadly trees and wildlife that make it impassable by road, and extremely dangerous to cross on foot. First humans in South America? Due to lower sea levels and more exposed land during the Ice Age, humans may have reached South America on foot, bypassing the Darien Gap and using coastal routes rather than navigating the treacherous jungle interior. The Darien Gap is naturally treacherous, dense rainforests, swamps, and steep mountains, high-speed rivers, heavy rain that leads to flooding, deadly trees and wildlife that make it impassable by road, and extremely dangerous to cross on foot. It is possible humans reached South America on foot rather than by boat, but boats are also a real possibility, and a combination of both is not out of the question.
Right, and so some people don't know about the Darien Gap. So there's things like deadly needle trees in the Darien Gap. And these needles are very long and are infectious. Go ahead and read it.
The needle trees in the Darien Gap are actually chunga palms, Astrocarium strandleanum, also known as black palms, which are densely anchored with long, sharp, black spines that can reach up to 20 centimeters, 8 inches in length. These spines,
8 inches, that's heinous.
Like, imagine tripping. Like being one of the first groups to head into the Darien Gap, tripping on like a log or stump or something and falling into that.
Oh, yeah.
These spines, which cover the trunk, are a significant bacteria-laden hazard to travelers and are used by local indigenous communities for, according to the Rainforest Foundation, US, creating intricate traditional handicrafts. Appearance: they are slender palms reaching up to 15 to 20 meters in height. The trunk is covered in rows of flattened black spines, especially between old leaf scars. Danger: the spines are highly dangerous. They are often covered in bacteria that can cause severe, deep puncture wounds and infections.
Right, and the infections actually can lead to death.
Oh, yeah.
So, and since they're all over, like you said, and it wouldn't be hard when there's a forest of them to bump one on accident and then become infected and then without help a long time ago die. The Darien Gap is a seriously hard place just with the trees. That's not even the animals.
Yeah, just the wild animals, the predators out there, that adds a whole new level of danger.
Oh, yeah. And of course, you might run from a predator and bump into a tree on accident.
Each plant grows up to 15 to 20 meters, 49 to 66 feet tall, and, like most other palms, is topped with a terminal cluster of large leaf fronds. Unlike most other palms, however, the slender trunk of the chunga palm is densely anchored with flat, black, needle-like spines up to 20 centimeters, 8 inches long, just as a show. Yes, chunga palms are really that intimidating.
Yeah.
But yeah, and just the picture you included, those things do look intimidating.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, I wanted to know about in a sense, land possible routes. And so I looked for how old we have information on people near the Darien Gap or whatever. for possibly, being land, but it also could be both, because both of the things are found like really close to the water artifacts. So it still doesn't, it's not like it's found in the central interior. The two oldest things in that area are literally found on coastlines almost. So it doesn't help us like solve which thing it could be. I mean, you could have people walking near the coast, but it also doesn't rule out that those were boats, and like you said, stopped, did some hunting, and then kept going. So once again, it doesn't help us that the artifacts are also like right near the water.
No, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about the former coastline that would have been there.
Right.
Like
well, that would be
at this time. Like how far
that would have made actually
these.
They would have been then more inland. So yes, I agree. In that thinking, yes, that's a good point, because that lighter blue would have been the coastline.
Yeah.
So yes, at those times, that's true. Thinking about that, you're right. Those would have been more inland. So maybe it still shows that it probably was by land. That's a good point. Now it doesn't look like it, but back then you're right. That probably would have been deep inland. Good point. Thank you. So maybe it was just walking.
Yeah.
And also when it says BP, so people know, I hate when they do this. It's not the same as BCE. BP, there's two different things too. Some people do it calibrated, and that actually changes the numbers, which I hate when they do that. BP without calibrated, what it means is that before present, and when they mean before present, they mean the time of DNA, which was 1950. So it's 1950 plus that time. So it actually, you got to add 70 more years for now time, which I hate that. I wish they just put years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like some articles I've read, they'll use them interchangeably. You'll have BP, then you'll have the calibrated BP, which can increase the age of the site by several hundred years, and then you have
no sense too, because if you ever look at, I do not claim, by the way, to fully grasp how it's not just straightforward, because if you ever looked at a chart that tries to explain the calibrated, literally every time it goes, it jumps 100 or 200, sometimes 300, sometimes 500. Sometimes it jumps 1,000. I'm like, what are you doing? I just... And
not just that, there are different calibration standards depending on which hemisphere you're in.
So the whole thing is just, to me, I really do not appreciate how they do that. It's like it's already confusing, and you literally made it worse.
And just one more thing, even if you have a calibrated BP date next to your BC date, they still won't line up.
No,
you can't just take it's BP, this is BC. Like the BC, you add 2,000 years to bring it to our time.
Right, which is much easier.
Yeah, you'd think it'd be straightforward like that since it's calibrated, but the dates are still going to be different by a few decades.
Well, and I told you, the older it gets, if it's only say 100 BP and 100 calibrated BP, it's going to be 150 or something. But then when you go to 1,000, it's 150 plus the number. Then if you go to 4,000, it's 800 or 300 plus.
Oh yeah.
And then at 10,000, it's 2,500. Yeah. What are you doing? I don't even understand. Talk about making it almost impossible to grasp.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, at least in the region I'm most familiar with for the calibration curves, Northern Hemisphere, that's how it works. Further back you go in time, the error ranges just keep increasing.
I understand if they want to say between this time and this time, okay, fine, that makes sense. But that's not generally how it's presented. I'm very displeased. I would just wish that they would just say years ago, or leave it the same way it was before BPE, where at least so we know, okay, add 2,000, you're done, or whatever.
That's the method I've been using. I just use BCE.
I tried to do years ago because I really hate it. But anyways, going back to this stuff, it just shows that these artifacts that they found of fishtail points, which are something particular to an evolution of Clovis, points that's more in line with South America. It's being found in Panama, so it must have changed somewhere in either Central America or Southern North America before going into South America. But anyways, so then the tools in right at the edge of the Darien Gap is also 11,500. Go ahead and read what I have written down there.
Prehistoric evidence in the Darien Gap includes Paleo-Indian stone tools, 11,500 to 9,000 BP, near the Gulf of San Miguel, early Holocene human settlements, and pre-Columbian sites with ceramics dating back to 1300 BCE. Research shows 8,000-year-old cultivated crops, larin, arrowroot, along with later platform mounds, gold, and jade artifacts indicated sophisticated long-term human occupation. Early occupation, Paleo-Indian/early Holocene. Excavations at rock shelters, such as Vampiros 1, show human presence from 11,500 to 7,700 BP. Tools like Clovis and fishtail points suggest the region was a corridor for early migration.
Right. And like you said, if we add the sea level drop, then these would actually be inland. I was thinking, you're right, though. I was thinking, well, now they're on the coast, but you're right. These would have been probably inland.
Amongst the oldest evidence for human presence in South America is from around 13,000 years ago. The fishtail projectile point style became widespread across South America, with its disappearance around 11,000 years ago, coincident with the disappearance of South America's megafauna. Fishtail points, also known as fell points, are a style of Paleo-Indian projectile point widespread across much of South America at the end of the late Pleistocene, around 13,000 to 12,000 years ago. The chronological timing is disputed. Some authors favor a short chronology spanning 12,800 to 12,200 years ago, while others favor a long chronology spanning 13,500 to 10,200 years ago. It is the earliest widespread lithic style in South America, being contemporaneous in its earlier stages to the use of Clovis points in North America. Fishtail points may be derived from Clovis points, or possibly from fishtail-like points found on the Gulf Coast of North America and in Central America. Fishtail points varied significantly in size and form, and many were likely hafted to spears, which were possibly used in combination with spear throwers, though some are suggested to have served other purposes, like as knives or as cutting tools. And the same point may have been used for multiple functions. Following being damaged, the points were often later recycled into burins or cutting tools, or less often scrapers or other lithic types, sometimes in combination on the same artifact. Other lithic tools utilized by fishtail producing peoples include blades. Clovis points date to the early Paleo-Indian period, with all known points dating from roughly 13,400 to 12,700 years ago. Originally, it was assumed that they were used in a thrusting spear. Later suggestions arose that the spears had been used as throwing spears, either as is or with spear thrower atlatl, which technically would be considered darts, or as a braced weapon, pike. It is also possible the points were used in the animal butchering process. Around 10,000 years before present, a new type of fluted projectile point called fulsum appeared in archaeological deposits, and Clovis-style points disappeared from the continental United States. Most fulsum points are shorter in length than Clovis points and exhibit longer flutes and different pressure flaking techniques. Like the Clovis culture, the people who produced fishtail points were willing to transport rocks and stone tools hundreds of kilometers away from the original outcrop. In one case, 482 kilometers or 300 miles. Which
Right, 300 miles is far for 12,000 or more years ago.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like 300
right?
miles. Like
so much for the people who are sedentary and don't move around.
Oh, yeah. Which may have been the result of exchanges between different groups. The people who produced
the pause just for a second. Wait a minute. So there was exchange in the United States 12,000 years ago?
Oh.
I mean, it makes sense to me. But I'm just saying some people act as if these groups are isolated and when? Because at the beginning they weren't isolated, and then later they weren't isolated in the archaic, and then later from that we know they're not isolated. So they really probably never were isolated.
No, probably not, because even at this early period during the Clovis era in North America, they're exchanging like exotic stones for their spear points across hundreds of miles. And we even see that continue into the early archaic with that piece of obsidian found in the eastern Great Lakes. So
right, which I know you and me both are under the impression that these people were way more connected and interactive than I feel like some people, give them credit for.
Like the Clovis culture, the people who produced fishtail points were willing to transport rocks and stone tools hundreds of kilometers away from the original outcrop, in one case 482 kilometers or 300 miles, which may have been the result of exchanges between different groups. The people who produced fishtail points are suggested to have been highly mobile hunter-gatherers. Fishtail points are suggested to have been utilized for big game hunting or megafaunal mammals, and the peak abundance of the points coincides with the proposed extinction interval for most large mammals in South America as part of the late Pleistocene megafauna extinctions. This suggests that the hunting may have had a causal role in the extinctions. Fishtail points disappeared following the extinction of the megafauna and were replaced by projectile point styles better suited for hunting smaller prey.
Right. And going back before we go to the next thing, I was watching Ancient Americas on South American stuff, because that's what I try to do, is to keep, even though I know stuff. That's why I feel like that someone like Graham Hancock, where you get an idea, you just stick to it no matter what, and we should be constantly trying to understand. Like I said, to me, I don't really try to debunk my ideas or exactly test them or to hold them and improve them. I just try to go like sort of what's the evidence. Now, I've said before, I do want to make sure my evidence that I think is accurate. So I go and look, is it still accurate to new information? And the moment it's not, I don't go, well, it must be the stuff that's wrong. I start to go, now I'm getting skeptical of my idea. But anyways, I know we had talked before about, the old copper culture and the possibility of, chieftains or something like that. And I was watching the Tulupi from the Amazon, and they were having chieftains, and they're completely, I talked before about wearing loincloths. They're completely naked. 100% naked. And they have chieftains. And their chieftains are almost like what people call big men, where the chieftain has to like prove themselves. And this is what I was telling you too, is before, I feel like people really have this limited opinion of what a chieftain is, and they think that, because also like this, the group is kind of both sedentary and highly mobile at the same time. So it like does both. So once again, it's naked, and yet they have this high culture, and it has chieftains, but yet they act like the first non-chieftain thing, which is a big man, because big men is different. People, anthropologists or whatever, or historians or whatever, academics often think that a big man comes first, and then out of that comes chieftain. So to have a chieftain operating like the more primitive than they're thinking, or earlier or less evolved than the chieftain, being a chieftain that's acting like the less evolved thing, and yet is a chieftain, just shows, like I said, this thinking of chieftain has to be like some kind of cookie cutter, just is nonsense to me.
No, there's a scale there. Yeah, and even like you've shown with your diagram for chieftains, it's not so simple as, oh, you have a chieftain, therefore they're automatically sedentary.
Exactly, or they're farming.
Yeah,
no, actually,
or like we've talked about,
they wear clothes.
Yeah, or like with the Pacific Northwest, they had clothes. Some people walked around almost nude. They had chieftains, but it wasn't farming; it was fishing.
Fishing,
and not just that, they had chiefdoms, but they also had mixed lifestyles. There were fully sedentary groups and highly mobile groups.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying is,
so there's so much variation.
These people were mobile, so because they're mobile, can't be a chieftain. They could have had a big man. I'm like, yeah, but there's evidence. We know of actual tribes that, like I said, I just learned, the Tulupi, because I did not know they were a chieftain. And also, because Ancient Americans talks about it, says they're a chieftain and they also act like a big man. And I'm like, those two concepts are supposed to be not work together. And that they're highly mobile and yet sometimes sedentary. Those are also not supposed to work together.
But you can find cases where they do work together.
Right. And that's why I tell you that when they say, oh, because of this one thing, this one behavior, the other behavior is impossible. I'm like, but it isn't. Yeah. Maybe it's in your head. It is.
Yeah. Maybe your like theory, your old theory book from like the 1970s says it's impossible.
Right. But that doesn't.
But it's not.
Right. It's like I said, I was thinking, oh, how'd they pass the Darien Gap? And then I learned, well, the land was different. And then, okay, well, then I guess, never mind. But then also, like you had to point out, because I wasn't thinking about it. that here these sites now look like they're on the coast. But you're like, yeah, but Damien, remember the land was different. Like, oh yeah, so they're almost the center of the thing. Never mind.
Yeah, they look inland because of the modern coastline. Wind back the clock, and those things could be quite a ways inland, like dozens of miles.
Right, which then stops looking like it's coastal. But that's what I'm talking about, is that we need to have a more fluid thing. That's also why, like I said, I like to go reinvestigate and learn as much possible, because sometimes I strengthen my theories and sometimes they get weakened. But so far my feeling about chieftains and for all my stuff that I've learned, because he also, like, some people study chieftains in, like, say, one area, where I've studied chieftains as a concept worldwide. And so when they pick, like, oh, well, this is how they are in the Pacific Northwest, I'm like, yeah, they're like that in California, they're like that in Papua New Guinea, they're like that in Indonesia and Africa, and they're like that, now I know South America. I mean, so
so, like, just because you have, like, two different chiefdoms on other sides of the world, like, they can still operate similarly. Like, especially if their economies are oriented to, like, the same food focus, like fishing or aquaculture, like you've talked about before.
Right, exactly. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
people forget about, they're just like he was saying that they had, the Tulupi had forest gardens, which I had said before about forest gardens. The forest gardens is a way you plant things, you kind of like leave or whatever, and then come back and get it. So it's not really farming.
No.
It's still almost like hunting and gathering, but it's like cultivated hunting and gathering. So it's kind of like something in between. But it still goes back to show what I was saying before to you, is that we can't have these fixed things that we try to fit everything into this box. We need to do it the opposite. Our box needs to be filled with all the information of what's really going on. I feel the opposite of, I feel some people, they get, because like I told you, I heard that thing about poverty point. It's like, oh, well, they're hunter-gatherers, so they couldn't have had chieftains. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? That's like saying, well, because they don't have clothes on, then they couldn't be a high chieftain or have high culture or pottery. Oh, wait a minute. They had pottery, they had chieftains, they had high culture, high religion, and yet
it's like, it's this old, like, stereotypical way of thinking.
Like,
cooked up from, like, the early days of European archaeology that's just, like, been slapped onto North American archaeology. Like, and not even just that, just like American archaeology as a whole. Like these old ideas, these old idea systems that don't really fit all the evidence that we have now.
Right. And that's why I told you that, although I like to say, that I pretty much support everything that the academics say, with a grain of salt, because some of the things that they say, I don't agree with. But it's not like the Graham Hancock and, space aliens or advanced cultures that there's no evidence of. My thing is more like when they say, oh, they're hunter-gatherers, so they can't have chieftains, or big men can also be chieftains. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the evidence that there was something that does exactly that. So anyways, that's why I told you too, I hope that you expand your, like I've done, expand some of your stuff, so then you can see this broader thing that then I feel gives a better possible. And as you know, to me, all of us weren't there, so all of us are kind of speculating. So I don't feel like I'm not speculating, but what I try to do is have reasoned speculations.
Exactly.
So to me, a reasoned speculation is that's almost a logical jump, that this would be logically the case. It can't be something like Graham Hancock, which is not logical, because you go like, well, what's your evidence? Well, I don't have. Well, why do you think that? Well, because the things are kind of different, but kind of the same. Like, what? That doesn't prove fucking anything. That's not enough for me to feel that's a logical jump. That's not logical. I feel that is a wild speculation.
Yeah.
Because I also feel that, to me, just I wrote a chart before about what I think of speculations, because I don't think that for me it's just one and done, like wild and then reasoned. I don't think it's that true. I think it goes wild, sort of, just as a rough understand. Wild speculations like Graham Hancock, where there literally is no evidence, or almost what you say counteracts what we do know. So it's like terrible. Or ancient aliens or something. And then there's loose, where there's some stuff and it's like, it reminds me like the thinking of, because we're going to talk about that later, did the Polynesians get to America, or did Americans get to Polynesians, or did they meet each other in the water, so they never actually went on each other's land? Because they both had boats. So
that's a good question,
right? So here's the problem problem is some people say it's possible either way. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that's what happened.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
See, right? So
Yeah.
it's loose. I consider that a loose speculation, because saying something is possible is a loose speculation. It's not grounded, because you want to know, not is it possible, is it probable?
Yeah.
So to me, that's a justified. When something becomes probable, like if like we know that we have DNA, so we know it's probable. Somebody had to touch.
Mhm.
It can't be that somehow that they just found floating stuff, because they have on both sides, they have some evidence that it could be that the plants or whatever exchanged. But that could have been like, you kill me and the stuff in my boat you just take, right?
Mm.
Or I could have jumped out of my boat and you captured it and got my stuff and then start making, sweet potatoes in the Polynesians. But actually,
That's
we
another
didn't.
possibility.
Well, right, because it's loose. If it's loose, because you can really throw it all over, and it all sounds like maybe. That's why I call it a loose speculation,
Yeah.
which is not great. I don't like those. Those are just like maybes, But they're better than
darts on a
Graham
wall.
Hancock's
Yeah.
not possibles. But then there's justified, where, like I said, we have DNA, so it is justified to say there had to be human interaction, because 10% of people in Easter Island or Rapa Nui have Native American DNA that we know sometime around 1150 to 12 something or whatever, that DNA happened. There may even been two different interactions, because one study, which we're going to read, has two different dates, so could have even been twice. So that makes it more justified speculation. We still don't really know who did what, but it's justified to think someone did something, because the people are mixed. So then, to me, a reasoned speculation, though, is when it's almost a given. This has to be the case of something. That to me is a reason. I like those the best. I don't like the other ones, but it's good to know that there's a variation. So you don't just, like, if something is a reasoned speculation, you should feel more confident. If it's justified, like it has reasons to think it's possible and it could have happened, okay, that should not be like 100%. A justified speculation should never be 100% or even close to that. You should be like 50, 60, like, yeah, I'm kind of like, iffy, but yeah. And if it's a loose speculation, it should be like 30, like, And to Graham Hancock's wild speculations, you should be like 10% to 0. Like either it's not possible or it's so low, you're like, it's not. Show me something, and then maybe I'll consider it.
Yeah.
Anyways, just helping to understand, because I know sometimes I say a lot of different claims. I try as much as possible to make them reason, or to be as high on the level. I don't like loose. I like it. It have to be justified usually, or reasoned, but I prefer reasoned, because that's the logical jump. It's almost like, and that's, as you know, a lot of times I'll say stuff and I don't get like attacked by academics, because I try to make really strong arguments, reasoned speculations.
And that's the big difference between you and someone like Graham Hancock or all these other alternative researchers.
Right.
Like you're putting your stuff out there. You're developing arguments. You have your premises, your conclusions. You're going through the process, and you're showing your work for people to dig into.
Right.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Right.
Not
and
just
like
like
I
this
said,
wild
I try
speculation.
to form reasoned speculations that way.
Mm-hmm.
They really can't be attacked, because it's almost like they go, oh, yeah, well, okay.
See, that's different. Like one of the big issues academics have had with Graham is his theories that they can be attacked, but the way he like forms his arguments, it's like he cherry picks and moves his goalposts. So like you can attack his arguments, but you can't at the same time, because he's just gonna retreat and like do something similar. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. What to me,
with yours, like they're structured arguments, like evidence-based arguments, and so they're difficult to attack, but in a different way than Graham. Like the way you're structuring your arguments, that's the way that it should be done.
well, thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Well, no,
And
I've
like I
noticed
said,
that
too,
from going through your articles and talking with.
I appreciate it. Well, that's why I told you too, is I don't just want to present like wild theories and stuff. I try to present what I think is true. It most of the time follows what academics think. Once in a while, it's tweaked a little bit because of and I explain why. Here's why I don't agree with them.
Yeah.
But I told you too, though, I am willing to be wrong, which Graham doesn't seem to be. I'm not threatened if you challenge me. If you can challenge me and show me that some of my thinking where I think is reasoned is less than that, I'm going to lose confidence, because I feel as a reasoned thinker, you should. If your argument can't stay reasoned and is lowered on the speculation level that I explained, it should demand lowering of your confidence. And then if it gets down to the Graham level, just let it go. Which one time is one archaeologist, I had said to him, because I saw that, because normally in the Middle East, so people know, in the Middle East, there's an opinion that pre-pottery is anything before 9,000. But I knew that Çatalhöyük started at 9,500 and seems to have pottery. So I said, hey, I was thinking, was there, certain events that happened, climate and stuff. And also they seem to have at a certain point leader who's cracking people in the head, maybe, or it's domestic violence where the people are hitting each other. There's some kind of conflict. Did that get associated why they ended up with pottery? Or maybe it's new ideas coming from outside, which is causing this strife. And he goes, well, actually, the people before them that's connected to them culture, and then the one before that, 10,500 had pottery. I'm like, what? and so I'm like, wait a minute. I thought there was not until 9,000. He goes, well, there's only this one site in central Turkey, and then the one that relates to it, and then Çatalhöyük, which relates to the other two. They all had pottery and they're giving it to each other, and they have similar DNA. Dude, within like 1 second, I already changed my idea. I go,
wow, like that quickly.
And
that's pretty cool.
Within an hour, I had already made a new blog about that information.
That's neat.
And he said, I have never seen a person just drop what they thought with conviction, because I felt it was reason. Drop with conviction, do a complete, U-turn, and then go towards the new information and then own it. Like, I have never seen anyone, he's even talking about academics, never seen anyone do that. Just stop, change, and then have a whole new theory.
Yeah, because you have to think even it doesn't even have to be an academic, even like an enthusiast or someone from the general public. You'd think that they'd be hesitant. Like maybe they'd debate it, they'd hold off for a while. Like, are you sure that's actually dated correctly? There's actually pottery there. It's not from something else. But no, that's admirable that you're able to not be dogmatic and to just pick up this new information.
I was blown away, because I went and looked at those two things and it said they had pottery, and I was like, I'm done. My whole thing changed. Holy shit. But that's what I'm saying. I want people to also be like that. So I hope that they don't just learn from the information I do, but how I try to think, because I feel like that's what ends up with me having better thinking, is not because I just am so brilliant. I picked the correct theory from the beginning, like Graham, 30 years ago, stick to it forever, and then finally I prove it. No, that's not how I got these great thinking. My great thinking is because I can shift on a dime if I am shown to be in error.
Oh, no, and I'm the same way when researching this North American stuff, because a lot of it's still so new, especially with the OCC.
Right.
And for this next topic that we have on the screen, the burials in Patagonia.
Yes.
I want to talk about something that I've been researching recently.
Please do.
That would change the current model of the OCC. And, there aren't many people actively researching it, so I'm going to throw my hat in the ring here.
Right. Sounds great.
When the OCC was first seriously being investigated with...
Go ahead and say what it is, because you and me know what that means. OCC.
Okay. OCC.
Always assume that people have. That's why sometimes I say for other people, not just talking to you, because people could be watching and have never heard of that. Remember?
Okay. OCC is short for Old Copper Complex or Old Copper Culture. If you use the term Old Copper Culture, it kind of implies they were all uniform. They all believed the same thing. They all had the same language. Something like that. Old Copper Complex is what's preferred nowadays, because the evidence we have shows, hey, these people, they aren't using the same arrowheads, the stone spear points. They're not consuming the same foods. Some styles are different depending on region. Like there are different styles around Lake Superior than there are in, say, southeastern Ontario or over in Saskatchewan.
Right.
It just shows that there are different groups using copper. It's not just one entire uniform tradition. Back in the 60s, during and after the radiocarbon revolution, that allowed a lot of these sites to get dated. Central, eastern, and southern Wisconsin were originally considered the core core of the old copper complex. This is where you had the most artifacts. This is where you had the most burials, like confirmed cemeteries with between dozens and hundreds of bodies.
Right.
Once metal detectors got around and started exploring the northern forests, which even today are still incredibly rural, bug infested, and dense, like surprisingly dense with forest and wetland, they started finding a lot of copper artifacts up there, going all the way up the rivers leading into northern Wisconsin, into upper Michigan and the Keweenaw Peninsula, which is one of the main sources for their copper at the time. With all the data we have now, it looks like there are possibly, or even likely, as many copper artifacts in northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula, the western upper peninsula, heading up into the Keweenaw. There are as many copper artifacts there as there are in the south.
Oh, wow.
Not only that, the largest well-made items tend to be found clustered around Lake Superior. There are a couple sites in the east along the Ottawa River called Allumette Island and Morrison's Island. These are considered workshops. They're like trade zones. A lot of copper has been found at these two sites. Allumette is the older one, dating between 4200 and 4100 BCE. And then we have Morrison's Island coming in between 3700 and 3400 BCE. Burials have been found at these sites. But what's interesting to me, which pushes against the older model of social complexity increasing and jewelry becoming, or just jewelry starting to appear during the late Archaic and terminal OCC period.
Right.
At Morrison's Island, 5 bracelets were found alongside a bunch of copper pendants. What I want not only you, but everyone else to keep in mind, this is a peripheral site. The copper artifacts being found here are a fraction of what the core around Lake Superior was producing.
Right.
So what this tells me is, like, from the onset of this mining phase, they're already producing stuff that isn't supposed to be getting produced until the late Archaic and terminal Archaic. They already have bracelets and decorated bracelets too. They're already producing pendants. They're already producing a form of pendant which has been confirmed to be part of a copper headdress. That is confirmed for the Ray site. They found an individual buried there with a headdress, like a fur headband, lined with copper feathers. Like they're flat, somewhat triangular, and at the end there's a little hook to wrap around the headband. That exact same style has been found at the Morrison site, and it's also been found by metal detectorists in northern Wisconsin and up north of Isle Royale along Lake Superior's north shore. Another thing that's been found around northern Wisconsin and over at the Allumette Island and Morrison's Island sites are crescents. This is important because these crescents, they're linked with symbology. They're shaped like cattle horns, they're shaped like canoes, and they're shaped like crescent moons. These things, they've been found in cemeteries, they've been found in caches, and what's interesting is if you look over to the east, between 3000 and 2000 BCE with the Maritime Archaic along the Gulf of Maine coast, they're also making identical crescent forms. The contexts where most of these have been found are in cemeteries and in caches. A lot of those same styles and even identical styles are being found by metal detectorists in northern Wisconsin. That's leading me to suspect that there are burials in northern Wisconsin, specifically in Vilas and Oneida County, that aren't being surveyed. Like all their artifacts are just getting pulled. Like all these crescents with confirmed cache and burial styles, not just in Wisconsin, not just in Ontario, and not just in New England, but even all the way up in Hudson Bay, coastal Quebec. They're finding that crescent style up there. They found at least one made of red slate, and even the researchers up there, they're thinking that's part of a burial site.
Yeah, and what's the one sad thing too is, like, we don't know how many items were made in wood, because
that's been like one of my biggest things. Like, how much wooden jewelry did these people make?
Well, because it reminds me of North 2 had a thing about how, I think it was Australia has these, wooden knives or whatever, but just the level of what they could have done stuff in wood. I know wood masks and stuff. The fact that we're only left with copper or stone doesn't mean that's all that was being done. The same with assuming bodies, like you said about graves. It could be that they were there a long time ago and they get worn away forever. Like in the Amazon, which the Tutlupi, there's never been anything found of their graves. So we know that they had to be burying people. Yeah. So the fact that it sometimes sometimes the environment, because of course it's heavy water and stuff, it could wash things away.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a freeze-thaw cycle up here too.
Right.
That
So
can deteriorate graves. And not only that, like the ancestors of these people, they were cremating a lot of their bodies.
right.
And we have that confirmed for the Middle and Late Archaic period too. And so it's not just like formal cemeteries with skeletons, you know, there's cremations too.
Right, and cremations is old. I know that at least off the top of my head, in Australia, there's like a 20,000-year-old cremation, evidence of it. And then the cremation was buried, which I know they did also do in the Great Lakes, that they not only cremated people, but then they would bury the cremation. So it's not like they just threw the ashes in the water, which of course we don't know they didn't do that too.
That's another possibility. I mean, we even do that nowadays.
That's what I'm saying
like,
is
you take your father, your grandfather to the river, like their favorite fishing spot from back in the day, and you dump their ashes there.
Right, and see, like I'm talking about speculations. So that would be a loose speculation because it is a possible, a maybe. There's no reason to think it's connected, but we do know that it could be. Could be's, maybes, possibles. Those are loose speculations. You should never have strong opinions about loose speculations. They're better than Graham Hancock, but they're not great. So some people, I feel, will have a loose. Like I've watched Oak Island, right? The show Oak Island, Curse of Oak Island. So excuse me, say it correct. I've watched it for like 11 years. Often it's kind of boring to me because it literally is a lot of loose speculations or wild speculations. It's just fucking
or like a lot of build up just for nothing.
Yeah. So to me, but I watched how they'll take a loose speculation and then they'll just run with it.
Yeah.
And to me, I would never do that. but anyways, let's go back to the reading. So
and so that's just what I've been exploring recently. Over 10,000-year-old burials in Patagonia. Patagonia is a geographical region in southern South America that spans part of Argentina and Chile. The archipelago.
Pause 1 second. I'll go down to. I have a map of it, so we're gonna go down just so people can real quick know what we're talking about Patagonia, because I actually didn't know. And Patagonia is not a place now. It's in between Argentina and Chile. See down there, it's the lighter green. So it actually is part of like this lower part of Chile, and the lower part of Argentina is called Patagonia. So it's not a place like that we have now. It's more like a region. Anyway, just so people can understand where the heck Patagonia is, if you don't know.
Patagonia is a geographical region in southern South America that spans parts of Argentina and Chile. The archipelago of Tierra del Fuego is sometimes considered part of Patagonia. When Spanish explorers first arrived, Patagonia was inhabited by several indigenous groups. In a small portion of northwestern Patagonia, some communities practiced limited agriculture, while in the remaining territory, most people lived as hunter-gatherers, traveling on foot in the eastern plains and using dugout canoes and dalkas in the western fjords and channels.
Right. So if you understand that area over there, it's like a whole bunch of small little islands that aren't really connected with a whole bunch of like water passages or something almost in between them. So you could see where canoes would be literally like something you would almost need.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's just like a bunch of island chains, mountains.
Right, they're real close together.
In South America, much debate has surrounded the timing and routes taken by early hunter-gatherers into the continent. Among the hypotheses are three main dispersal routes along the interior corridor. The Pacific coast or the Atlantic coastal routes would have been particularly favorable due to their reduced survival risk, connection to major rivers that could be used to travel along and venture inland, and access to fresh water. The lack of archaeological data is in part due to sea level rise during likely submerged many earlier hunter-gatherer sites. Excavations revealed three individuals from Patagonia, indicating early human settlement along South America's Atlantic coast around 10,210 to 9,878 years ago. Individual 1, age 8 to 9, and 10,798, 10,302 years ago. Individual 2, age 14. Individual 1 was buried with red ochre and 50 bird bone beads, which likely
I think that's look at they're using red ochre, but they're also using the bird bone beads.
That's significant for me because we find that in North America too. That same combination, like not just bird bone beads, but just bird bone in general with red ochre. Individual 1 was buried with red ochre and 50 bird bone beads, which likely once formed a 1.5 meter long necklace. Oh, that's pretty cool. This evidence, along with the reuse of the same burial location within roughly 400 years.
Pause for 1 second. So when it says likely once formed, so that's in a sense, more justified because they have the bone beads. There are several things, and then they're just saying it's not a reasoned one where you know that's what it is. It's justified though because it's likely, it's more probable than if it was loose. You would say could be, maybe, possibly, but when it likely is, and it is because you have all those beads, and if they're around your neck, well, probably was a necklace. I mean, it's just
This evidence, along with the reuse of the same burial location within roughly 400 years, indicates that these hunter-gatherer populations maintained knowledge of the territory and repeatedly returned to this specific spot. This is further supported by the use of red ochre, which is readily available nearby, and the inclusion of bird-bone beads, which suggests the existence of established funerary practices and a knowledge of the local raw material source spots, a pattern inconsistent with groups simply passing through an unfamiliar landscape. So yeah, these people, it looks like they came into the region and they liked the area and they started like settling down, and their seasonal round was like confined to that area.
right.
And so that's how you could have them return to this cemetery spot and know where to get the red ochre, where to find the birds to make these beads. Paleo-Indian period Colombia. The oldest archaeological finds are from the Pabenza and El Totumo sites in the Magdalena Valley, 62 miles southwest of Bogota, dating from the Paleo-Indian period, 18,000 to 8,000 BCE. Indigenous people inhabited the territory that is now Colombia by 12,500 BCE. Nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes at the El Abra, Tibito, and Tequendama sites near present-day Bogota traded with one another and with other cultures from the Magdalena River Valley.
Wait a minute. So once again, way before the Paleo period, way before even the Archaic period, they're doing what again? They're trading with other cultures in the valley. So once again, even though these sites are a little bit, dispersed, they're still trading.
Yeah.
Because unlike the other people, we know that that's more the norm than some sort of rare fact.
Yeah, it's looking to be like not just in this area, but around the world. It's looking like even this far back, most tribes weren't isolated. They were very interconnected.
Exactly.
With nearby groups and distant groups also.
Right, and the fact that they'll go 300 miles to go get stone tools, or stones for stone tools or whatever. I'm just making a comment that I know you already agree with this, but I'm just saying here's more evidence that supports our reasoned speculation that groups were way more connected than people give them credit for.
Yeah, and if they're way more connected, it opens up because we don't know exactly how this trade relationship would have worked, but knowing that they were trading this far back, that they were this interconnected with each other,
right?
It opens up some like realistic possibilities. You have down the line trade. Maybe they were building up supplies to have certain groups or individuals take this entire journey for like alliance formation or something involving rituals.
Right. Those could be. So that's loose speculation because it could be. We don't know. But like I said, those are still better than Graham's wild speculations that are not reasoned and not justified and not even loose. So this right here is because a lot of people, when I was saying how the Darien Gap is impassable, they're like, well, there's indigenous groups that have lived there and they've made that their home for thousands of years. Well, thousands of years is questionable for sure. Yes, they did surpass the Darien Gap, but there's no one in the heart of the Darien Gap itself. They're more like on either side, and they literally could have took boats in the coast and not directly gone over the mountains and through the woods. Not that I'm saying they couldn't have, but I'm just saying that. And then the fact that these are more historical, not prehistorical, also should make you pause. That's the problem is sometimes when people they see groups now, they think, well, they've always been there. Well, some groups might have always been there, but it doesn't mean some ones.
Yeah, that's a problem nowadays with people researching indigenous cultures.
Right.
Because a lot of them will claim that they've been in that spot like since the dawn of time.
Right.
And we know that's not true, at least for a lot of them anyway.
These people right here, we're going to read some more stuff. These people right here couldn't have been there earlier than 2,000 years ago. So pretty current.
Yeah.
And we know by 2000 they absolutely had boats. So because we know that the Caribbean people were there at least 6,000 to 7,000, meaning they had boats, and probably left from maybe Central America and South America. So we know both Central and South America had boats by at least that time. So someone being there 2000 does not surprise me, especially since they're almost on both sides of the coast and could have gone either way. But the point is still, it shows that where the language came from. Go ahead and read the writing.
Embera, Wonan, Choco are a semi-nomadic indigenous people in Panama living in Darien province and speak the Embera and Wonan languages, part of the Choco language family. Some people point to the Chocoan speakers living on the edges of the Darien Gap as some kind of evidence that people have always lived there from the first people of the Americas, but this contradicts the evidence. Based on archaeological and linguistic findings, the idea that Chocoan speaking groups have continuously occupied the Darien Gap since the earliest peopling of Central and South America is generally unsupported by the evidence. The Embera Wonan group, a semi-nomadic indigenous people in Panama, live in the Darien province on the shores of the Chacunac, Sambu, and Turau rivers and their waterways. The Embera Wonan were formerly and widely known by the name Choco, and they speak the Embera and Wonan languages, part of the Choco language family. The Choco language family and is not known to be related to any other language family of Central or South America, although in the past relationships have been proposed with the Carib, Arawak, and Chibchen language families.
And pause for 1 second. When Carib is the one why we call it the Caribbean, but there's also no direct evidence that the Carib languages of South America inherently are what went to the Caribbean. It's almost more likely that the Arawak language went to the Caribbean, even though we call it the Caribbean, just so people know.
The Choco people used matrilineal descent, practice polygamy, and live in family units. The cacique, or chief, of the Choco lives in the largest village and capital of the Choco nation, named
so a chieftain,
Union Choco.
Which is so uncommon.
Yeah. And to have a chieftain with a semi-nomadic group?
Oh, what?
Wow.
Did Damien say that was possible before? Yeah, I did say that. Maybe it's because I've read enough things. Oh, yeah, that's it.
It was the Chocoan Embera and Wonan, residents today of eastern Panama and northwestern Colombia, represent an ancient population centered on the Atrato/San Juan Trench and adjacent parts of Colombia's western Cordillera. They likely moved westward across the Darien and San Bias in the wake of the extinction of the pre-contact Suevan polity and of Spanish withdrawal in the face of native resistance. It was Chocoan speakers who were in much of the Darien region when the Spanish invaded.
Right. So some of them could have already been there pre-Spanish, but a lot of them moved over there to get away from the Spanish. So that's kind of what that's saying. And so as you see, the Darien is right at the mix of where the Colombia and the Panama touch. The Darien and the border, it's almost the heart of it. And then the Chichiban languages also go over that. And then the one in North Colombia, that language or that people, Zulu, whatever, Ziru or something. Anyways, that's the one that actually connects to Rapa Nui or Easter Island, which is weird because it's on the, in a sense, Atlantic side of Colombia, not the Pacific side. And yet it's related to the native all the way in Rapa Nui on the Pacific side. So it kind of doesn't exactly make sense, but also we do know, once again, that we've already talked about, people move around. So just because we know that these people, we're going to talk about them later and how long they've been there since, in a sense, 2,200 years ago in that area. So they must have traveled out of that area to get 1,200 years ago or whatever, the 1200s, to get to Rapa Nui. So it is confusing. The facts sometimes are not easily explainable. But so I'll go down and go ahead and read what it says.
Chocoan languages may have a more recent presence compared to neighboring Chibchen languages. Genetic studies on ancient and present-day indigenous populations have substantially contributed to the understanding of the settlement of the Americas. Those studies revealed that the population ancestral to non-Arctic Native Americans derives from a genetic admixture between ancient East Asian and Siberian groups somewhere in Northeast Asia, 20,000 years ago. Around 16,000 years ago, after its arrival in North America, this genetic ancestry split into two lineages known as Northern Northern Native American and Southern Native American.
Right, and then you had missed the thing above. It says, it is believed that the languages of the Chichen-speaking tribes share a common ancestor 8,000 years ago. However, the differences in languages are thought to have come about from the influence of outside people, including those from Mesoamerica.
Yeah, I just started reading this bottom part because that's where the page was centered.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
I'm just saying. No, you did fine.
But no, it's worthy to point out that top part.
Right, because it gives you an idea of how old these languages are. Because once again, it doesn't say 12,000 years ago when they showed up. And the language it says also was influenced from Mesoamerica. So, which we're going to find out later because they're interacting between each other. So you can see how that could happen, which takes boats. Maybe land also, but it definitely by boats.
While Northern Native American ancestry is largely confined to ancient and current populations of North America, the Southern Native American lineage expanded further south and constitutes the main ancestry component of ancient and present-day indigenous South Americans. Southern Native American ancestry diversified within North America into at least 3 sublineages, i.e. one related to the Clovis-associated Anzac-1 individual from western Montana, USA, one found in ancient California, Channel Islands individuals, and the last one representing the main ancestry source of modern-day Central and South Americans.
Right, so pause for 1 second on that. And if you notice, it wasn't all just come from the older one. This goes back to, like I said to you, when people are like, well, if there is mythology in South America, it has to be only the Clovis related. I'm like, no, it doesn't. I mean, here it is saying that there's 3 different sources, and the one from California is like 4 to 5, and then the one after that says the main modern source is even younger, probably more related to Mesoamerica.
Yeah, and that touches on what you've said multiple times. It wasn't just a single migration.
No.
Or multiple. There were waves and waves of migrations.
Right.
And
so
that's
right. So to say that it has to be, we're gonna one time I'm gonna show you this where this guy says this. He claims it. Oh, if it's there, it has to be 15,000 years old. I'm like, no, it doesn't. To me, that's to me a wild speculation because it literally has no support, and I can offer evidence that debunks it. So you should just stop saying that. It's not even loose. Because loose is there's kind of possible. There's 3 migrations. Saying it has to be only this old, only the first one, literally denies the other 2. Also denies the constant up and down, even after that point, of trade, which can trade more than just tools, but also ideas.
Oh, yeah.
So that also completely, I feel like it's completely debunked. It's like saying they were all sedentary and they all were isolated. We know that's not true. So when you say that, it's not, well, it could be possible. No, it can't. No, it literally can't. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to know anything else. I know that statement is inaccurate. That's like saying, well, the Hope Whale never interacted with anyone. They only stayed to their little hub or something. You're like, yeah, I won't even entertain that, Graham Hancock. You said something that, well, how can you know it's not true? Because I know it's not true. I know that's not true. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like sometimes, because someone's said before, well, everybody can offer different things, they're what they feel is evidence. And I go, no, they can't. Well, everybody can have different speculations. I don't agree. No, they're not all equal, is what I'm trying to show you. Is just because we're all speculating doesn't mean we're all just throwing shit out and there's no.
No, it doesn't mean all speculations are equal.
They're not.
Not by a long shot. Oh, definitely not.
Right. So the fact that they already says that they're related to 3 different ones, and those are just the major ones, not like we said any other ones that could have been besides that. Already to say that they all have to be only the oldest is literally denying the reality. Anyways, keep going.
Each of these sublineages provided a wave of ancestry into the gene pool of ancient South Americans. Individuals from Chile and Brazil, dating back to around 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, respectively, were more genetically related to the Anzac-1 genome than individuals from the eastern Southern American coast, the Southern Cone, and the Andes from 10,000 years ago onward. In addition, the California Channel Islands ancestry was found in the Central Andes by 4,200 years ago, and it became widespread in the region thereafter. However, the exact timing of these population movements into the southern subcontinent remains largely unsolved to date. The Istmo-Colombian area, stretching from the coast of Honduras to the northern Colombian Andes, is critical to understanding the peopling of the Americas. Besides being the land bridge between North and South America, it is at the center of the three major cultural regions of Mesoamerica, Amazonia, and the Andes. At the time of European contact, the region was inhabited by a complex mosaic of human populations, mainly speakers of Chibchan, Chacoan, Carib, and Arawakan languages. Among those populations, those who were speakers of Chibchan languages were the most widespread in the region in terms of demography, cultural diversity, and territorial distribution. Chibchan is a language family with multiple, highly distinct branches, many of which are still spoken today in different regions of the Istmo-Colombian area. The homeland and antiquity of the Proto-Chibchan language and its status as the ancestor of all Chibchan languages remain subjects of debate. Highly intra-family variation in terms of lexicon and grammar suggests that the language family is ancient and began diversifying several thousand years ago. The locus of that incipient diversification, however, is still uncertain. Most scholars believe that this proto-language began to diversify in lower Central America, where the largest number of these languages is spoken today. However, some evidence suggests that Proto-Chibchan might have originated in South America and then diversified in Central America at a much later date. Genetic studies of ancient and present-day Istmo-Colombian indigenous populations revealed a distinctive ancestry component primarily associated with speakers of Chibchan languages. However, whereas mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA studies suggested a migration of Chibchan-related ancestry from Central America into Colombia and Venezuela, genome-wide studies favored an opposite south to north population movement.
Right. So people understand that makes it even more confusing. It seems like females went from south to north, but the males went from north to south.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Once again, sometimes the evidence does not help that much.
According to the latter model, speakers of Chibchan languages from Central America are not direct descendants of the first settlers in the region, but instead derive from a more recent back migration from South to Central America. The southernmost region of the Istmo-Colombia area is in the Altiplano Cundiboya sense, hereafter Altiplano. This plateau, with an average latitude of 2,600 meters in the eastern cordillera of the Colombian Andes, was inhabited by ancient hunter-gatherer groups from the late Pleistocene. During the early and middle Holocene phases of the pre-ceramic period, roughly 11,500 to 4,000 years ago, populations on the Altiplano underwent multiple cultural transformations, most notably increased sedentism and a transition from a hunter-gatherer subsistence to the introduction of horticultural practices and forest management. However,
right. See, we talked about forest management. Like I told you, the Tulupi people, the forest gardens is kind of the term for when you sort of plant things and then you leave and then you come back and harvest wild sense.
However, it was not until the early late Holocene, roughly 3,800 years ago, that the first clear evidence of maize cultivation appeared. During the subsequent formative period, roughly 3,000 to 1,000 years ago, a distinct type of pottery emerged on the Altiplano that is referred to as the Herrera ceramic complex, also known in the literature as the Herrera period, 2,800 to 12,000 years ago. It is still highly debated whether Herrera-associated groups on the Altiplano derived from an in situ development of local hunter-gatherers or were a consequence of population dispersals into the region. Around 12,000 years ago, a cultural phase... Oh, yeah, my bad. Around 1200...
Well, that's a big difference.
yeah, good point. Thanks for pointing that out, my bad. Around 1200 years ago, a cultural phase known as the Musica period began on the Altiplano and lasted until the imposition of the Hispanic colonial regime in the mid-16th century. Most available evidence is suggested of population continuity with the preceding Herrera period. The Musica period is characterized by a relatively continuous process of demographic growth, development of agriculture and trade, and social and political complexification. These factors played a considerable role in reshaping the musica culture and gave rise to the Chibchan-speaking population that dominated the Altiplano until European colonization. Data from 5 archaeological sites on the Altiplano encompass an ancient genomic time transect of around 5,500 years. The generated dataset includes 7 hunter-gatherer individuals from the pre-ceramic period, Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago, 9 individuals from the Herrera period, Colombia Laguna Della Herrera 2,000 years ago, 3 individuals associated with both initial and final phases of the musica culture, Colombia Las Delicias 1,200 years ago, and Colombia Soacha 520 years ago, all from the Bogota Plateau, and 2 individuals from further north in the Los Curos area associated with Guayne populations, Colombia Pernia 530 years ago. To determine which specific branch of southern Native American ancestry the Altiplano's hunter-gatherers derived from, researchers designed these analyses with the understanding that Chile Los Reales 12,000 years ago maximizes the Anzic-1 ancestry in South America. Peru Concacha 4,200 years ago is among the individuals with the highest California Channel Islands ancestry, and Peru Lorochoca 8,600 years ago does not exhibit either of these ancestries.
So in other words, 3 different peoples.
Mm.
And anyways, why also it's important to talk about this area specific. Like I said later, these are the people that met the Polynesians, that related to all these people. Just remind you also why, one, we're learning about South America, but also why this area specific and language group is important, because it's this language group that went and met Polynesians. This is the South American related group that went and met the Polynesians.
Yeah, you had mentioned the Polynesians just a moment ago. Yeah, it's important to keep in mind when you were talking about that. And Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago does not show a higher genetic affinity to Anzic-1 than Peru Lorococha 8,600 years ago, whereas Chile Los Reales 12,000 years ago is more closely related to Anzic-1 than Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago, indicating the absence of significant Anzic-1 related ancestry in the analyzed hunter-gatherers from the Altiplano.
Right.
Similarly,
so why that's important is what it's saying there compared to the people talk about why these people would have to have this 15,000-year-old DNA or mythology because of that. It's saying that by the 6,000, they really didn't have that older DNA. They indicated an absence of the significant related DNA. So they really aren't those people.
Similarly, statistics reveal that Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago does not show a distinct affinity with ancient California Channel Island individuals either.
Right, because they came later.
Yeah. Combined findings show that Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago does not belong to either the Anzic-1 related or California Channel Islands related expansions into South America, and is consistent with its derivation from the lineage that represents the primary source of ancestry for South America. This lineage has been shown to have long-standing genetic continuity in present-day individuals across multiple regions of South America, dating back at least 9,000 years. Therefore, we tested whether Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago shows differential affinity to any ancient and present-day population from South America with the outgroup statistics of the form Mbuti, modern/ancient Native Americans, Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago. This analysis revealed that Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago shares greater genetic drift with populations from Central and South America than with those from North America, but does not show specific allele sharing with any Central or South American population, consistent with Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago, deriving from a deeply divergent South American lineage.
Right, so it doesn't, even though it relates closer to Central and South America, it actually is its own thing 6,000 years ago.
Yeah. Researchers investigating this assumption by testing for potential differences in affinity between the ancient hunter-gatherer group and the ancient or present-day Native American individuals in the dataset. As observed in outgroup statistics, significant affinities are only observed when Central and South American individuals are compared against North Americans. Instead, statistics are found to be consistent with 0 for comparisons between ancient and modern-day Central and Native American populations, respectively.
How many?
0.
0.
0.
Right.
Not even a single one.
So going back to if you understand the mythology of the groups that are there, it's almost like it's saying it has to be under 6,000.
Yeah.
So going back to like I was saying about mythology, trying to because my thing also is to put everything in context and understand the broader picture. So I would be not feel comfortable talking about too many of the things down there being older than 6,000. Certainly wouldn't say no nonsense that it has to be all over 15,000. At least I wouldn't be able to say that with confidence.
Yeah. Combined, these results suggest the positioning of Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago as an outgroup to virtually most indigenous South Americas. When placing Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago in any possible position of the admixture graph, we obtained a statistically robust fit only when this group is modeled as a previously uncharacterized lineage deriving directly from the initial irradiation of Central and South American populations. Last, researchers analyzed our post-2000 years ago ancient genomic data from the Altiplano to investigate the presence of possible local genetic continuity. With statistics, researchers were able to show not only that Colombia Checwa 6,000 years ago is equally distant from all subsequent ancient groups in the Altiplano ancient Colombia, modern/ancient Native Americans, but also that this group is more closely related to subsequent ancient Colombians than to any other South American population in our data set. Ancient Colombian, modern/ancient Native Americans. Overall, the performed analysis provide robust evidence for a major genetic replacement on the Altiplano between 6,000 and 2,000 years ago.
Right.
Wow.
Go ahead.
Results show that the incoming genetic ancestry on the Altiplano is related to ancient and present-day populations speaking Chibchan languages from Central America. This can be explained most parsimoniously by Chibchan-related migrations from lower Central America to South America, rather than backward migrations to the isthmus.
See, now that's really important to know. So the ideas, when that person said, oh, they have to be, if they're in South America, it have to be 15,000. This shows that under 6,000 people came from Central America and came down to South America with their language and ideas.
A separate study found evidence for a previously unknown south to north expansion of Chibchan-related ancestry from lower Central America into the Mayan territories of Belize by 5,600 years ago.
Right. So people went down and then people quickly went right back up. And that's why it's confusing.
Yeah, it's not just a one-way migration, that people are moving around.
Which we talk about, right? And trade and all that. People are not isolated, not fixed. They're actually shooting down. This is real early. This is after 6,000, they shoot down. And then by 5,600, they're shooting back up.
Therefore, rather than modeling Central American populations associated with Chibchan languages as deriving from a mixture between North and South American ancestries, these results are consistent with an origin of Chibchan-related ancestries in lower Central America, followed by bidirectional gene flow toward both Meso and South America. This model of an original Chibchan homeland in Central America is supported not only by mtDNA studies on present-day populations who speak Chibchan languages, but also from linguistic observations, indicating that the Isthmus region exhibits the highest diversity within this language family.
Right, and like I told you before, that's one reason I like to study languages and not just the artifacts and not just the DNA, not just the religion connections, but the whole picture.
No, and
languages.
That's cool, because using that method, like this method that we're both using, like just pulling together the data to see what's there.
Right.
These readers used something similar and they were able to propose a homeland for this language. Right. That's incredible.
Right. And so that's why I was saying to you before, I like to use, that's why I feel like some people that go, oh, I only stick to the archaeology. Well, then you literally are missing the language. When language helps a lot understanding how people are moving around, how people are connected. And they definitely need to be looking at the science and DNA too. You can't just look at artifacts and have this blind thing. The same thing I feel with the mythology. You can't just look at the mythology irregardless of the archaeology and the language and the migration and the DNA. You need to put, because like sometimes I feel like what happens a lot of times, at least because I know I've investigated the mythology more than you. It's not that they don't put stuff together, but often all they do is they put language or mythology and often with DNA, and they only the DNA that they know that, like, one big migration or something. And once in a while while, they've also tried to add it with the language, but not even that often. And I don't hear a lot of mixing it with the archaeology. I feel like you literally have to do all of it, and then because it all should, if it is the truth, it all should kind of work together. It shouldn't be, like one thing. The one thing debunks your stuff, well, then that's because your stuff is wrong or is confused somehow.
That reminds me of an article I was reading recently where they had this site. It's related to the old copper people and those two sites I mentioned earlier along the Ottawa River. Well, on the older site, they had a younger burial associated with the Morrison's Island occupation.
Right.
Well, one thing I noticed that the researchers said was, well, if we just ignore this younger burial, I'm like, hold on, you can't do that. And then they did. They just ignored this younger burial and just like went on their way saying, well, we have these two distinct occupation phases for these different sites. But I'm thinking to myself, well, guys, you just ignored a whole burial. You can't do that. you know?
That's because that's what I feel. Sometimes people, and I understand, they don't know or they don't want to understand because then it will debunk their theory. But really, we shouldn't have theories that are fixed to our idea. We should try to bet our theory is fixed to the truth, and the truth sometimes changes, and then we need to change the theory.
Yeah.
At least that's the Damien's method.
Yeah.
I call it the hammer of truth. What are you talking about? How do you know that? And why is what you've offered of value? If you can successfully manage all those things, then you should have the truth until we find out differently.
Yeah, just pull together the data. Don't cherry pick. Don't discard dates carelessly just because they're a few hundred years older than the rest of them, because that could be a genuine date. No, well, the problem is that happens all the time.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't. I was just saying that
radiocarbon dating.
Well, that's what I told you too. I do like, and I've seen this one archaeologist that says he really likes, I don't remember the name of the person, but it's like Birkin's, Yaz's Birkin's mythology stuff. He's done a lot of stuff, a lot of great stuff. But he's not perfect. I have seen where he puts groups together that doesn't really make sense. So I feel like we can't be uncritical of even people that have done really good work. I'm not saying, what I'm saying? It's not all or nothing. You can do good work and still make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, and especially like you said, if you start leaving stuff out or changing how you do it depending on what you're talking about.
And that one example I just gave, like at those two sites, you can see a continuity. Like the researchers concluded that there is continuity at those two sites. You can see it with the transition of the lithic spear points and the copper artifacts and all that. Besides, the two islands, they're right next to each other. But just having them state that openly, that, if we ignore this younger burial at this older site, it's like, don't do that. Like, don't even think about doing that. It's not, it's not like a incredibly odd radiocarbon date. It's a burial, Yeah.
That's just not a good way to think.
No, and that's just one example of like some researchers, good researchers at that. Like some of the most knowledgeable people who've worked at that site are those researchers. It just goes to show that if you hold on to an older model, like of distinct phases or distinct occupations or distinct migrations, you can end up with an issue like that where stuff gets overlooked, ignored, and then by the end of the paper, like that burial or that site or that set of data, it's just completely off the table.
That's irresponsible to do that. We shouldn't do that.
No,
it's not reasoned. So go ahead and keep reading.
After the arrival of the Chibchan related ancestry, which completely reshaped the genetic landscape of the region, we find evidence of a long period of genetic continuity in the genetic profile of the local populations for over 1,500 years, from at least 2,000 to 500 years ago. The stability of genetic ancestry encompasses the end of the Herrera period and the beginning of the Muisca period.
Right, which that would include the time frame where some of those people went and met the Polynesians.
This points to a scenario in which populations speaking languages from the Chibchan lineage would have settled the Altiplano before the emergence of traits normally associated with the Muisca culture. And it shows that this cultural transition took place without a substantial migration from regions with a distinct genetic ancestry composition. In addition, such a genetic continuity extends through different cultural phases, within the Musica period and persists until the Spanish colonization. Colonial linguistic documentation established that Musica people spoke a now extinct Chibchan language.
Right.
When boats were first used, we can't be sure in Central and South America, but we do know boats were used to settle the Caribbean at least 6,000 years ago. About 6,000 years ago, at the start of the Archaic Age, humans first settled in the Caribbean islands, coming from Central and South America. 3,000 to 4,000 years later, stone tools gave way to clay pottery and the Ceramic Age began. Archaic Age Caribbean populations are consistent with descent from a single source population in Central or South America, with no notable ancestry from North America. The Ceramic Age people had a distinct genetic profile, similar to Arawak-speaking groups in Northeast South America.
Right. Remember, I had said to you the Arawak-speaking people, and then that map on the right-hand side shows the Arawak-speaking people, and the origin language is really relating to both Arawak and also to the Caribbean. Like where the Caribbean people come from right there.
The Ceramic Age people.
And then when they say the Ceramic Age, those people that are the Tejano ancestors, which are the Arawak speakers, then came after and took over the areas of the first inhabitants and completely, like almost 100%, like maybe it's 90 something, I don't know, but almost completely took over and displaced the earlier people.
The Ceramic Age people had a distinct genetic profile, similar to the Arawak-speaking groups in Northeast South America, and they almost entirely replaced the Archaic Age populations. Arawakan languages may have emerged in the Orinoco River Valley in present-day Venezuela. Taino, for the Caribbean group, to emphasize their distinct culture and language. The Taino ancestors were Arawak speakers from Venezuela in the Trinidad, migrating along the Lesser Antilles to Colombia and the Bahamas. The Kalinago, also called Island Caribs, or simply Caribs, are an indigenous people of the Lesser Antilles in the Caribbean. They may have been related to the mainland Caribs of South America, but they spoke an unrelated language and also spoke a pidgin language associated with the mainland Caribs. The Caribbean is derived from the name Carib. It was thought their ancestors were mainland peoples who had conquered the islands from previous inhabitants, the Ignari. However, linguistic and archaeological evidence contradicts a mass emigration and conquest, and the Kalinago language appears Taino, not Caribbean. The Caribbean languages share irregular morphology with the J and Tupian families, with a proposed J-Chupi Carib family connection.
Right, and the Tupi, like I was telling you, from the lower area of the Amazon, and they're completely naked, and they had chieftains, but they also had chieftains that were a lot like big men, and they also were both somewhat cemetery and highly mobile, and then they also did almost semi-agriculture, but not. Yeah, so
yeah, that's quite a combination of traits.
right.
Yeah.
Because, you can't that's what I was saying. Your box, you shouldn't try to fit everything into your box. Your box should be fit with the facts. The other way around. You fill your ideas with what's a reality, not try to fit reality to your preconceived ideas.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why so many of these complex hunter-gatherer groups were just anomalies originally. At least that's how researchers framed them, because they were trying to slot them in a box.
Right. And because I was going to say, I don't actually buy that they were that limited as, they act like, well, only a few were complex. I think probably a lot were.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, our improper thinking, which is funny to me too, because a lot of times they'll say, just because someone's hunter-gatherer doesn't mean they're primitive. And then turn around and say, because they're hunter-gatherer, they couldn't have been a chieftain. Like, wait a minute. Didn't you just say that hunter-gatherer is a subsistence strategy? Not a cultural identifier?
Isn't that
if it's not a cultural identifier to you, then why do you claim that it can't be a chieftain?
Yeah. If the primary difference between a hunter-gatherer fisher group and an agriculturist group is one bases their economy mostly on farming, that's the primary difference.
Right.
If that's the primary difference, then both should be able to have complex social structures.
I feel like that's what I'm saying to you. We're going to do one on nakedness too, a whole video.
Yeah, just like this group we have in South America with this combination of unique traits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
It
they're a
literally
chief, but
doesn't-
they're
it's
also
like
a
an-
big
it's like
man
an-
at the same time. They're semi-nomadic, but they're doing stuff with agriculture.
Yeah, they're literally all the boxes are just breaking.
Oh yeah, you're gonna
Yeah,
have
we
to
should
make
probably.
some more,
Speaking of which, that's
cookie
probably
cutters.
good. We'll address the Talupi more in the nakedness thing, because they're like complete. Even like the when the ancient America's video guy tries to show pictures of the Talupia, he has to black out their genitals because they don't have pictures without their genitals.
No.
Which I don't do, because I'm like, if you're watching my stuff, you want the truth, and this is historical. I'm not covering it up for you. Just like I don't care if you say the word fuck. This is not for children.
No.
I don't think children would even enjoy my videos.
No. No, and it's not like we're like sexualizing these people when we show them. It's
Exactly.
Like, this is how they dress. This is an appropriate way for them to dress in their day to day.
Yes. See, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Now I would feel differently if we, like you said, if we were sexualizing them. We're just presenting them as they presented themselves. It's our culture that thinks sexualized.
Yeah. See, and now like this one is actually pretty neat for me, like showing the distribution map of the canoes and just how many have been uncovered in Florida.
Right.
Because
that's why I added this, because I got, and you saw I didn't have this before. I kept looking because that's the kind of person I am. Even though I already feel I know things, and I don't just stop. I want to know.
No, and what's interesting about the Florida canoes is, like, even going back to the archaic, the styles that have been found in some of the lakes in northern Florida, they have those prow shapes at the front that we can see here in northwestern South America.
Right.
Not only that, but even way back in the archaic, they're making that style, and they keep making that style until contact. And so that's incredible to me.
Well, it shows there's probably a continuity. I doubt that that's just accidentally are doing this cultural, similarity behavior.
No,
what I
it's
find
incredible
interesting
for
is
me.
I would have thought that there should be more on the whole United States. It almost to me looks like the people came down with boats, maybe down the coast, and then once in Mesoamerica shot up the coast to Florida or wherever, which is interesting too, because down in Texas and down, they have those very old, in Louisiana, those old mound structures, which would, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like the LSU mounds that go back 9,000 or more years.
Right.
Not only that, like all the low-lying earthen and shell mounds that are now underwater.
Right.
Yeah. So
I'm just saying, it's interesting when you look at the boats, its distribution. It doesn't look like they shot across the center of which is what you would think would have happened. Yeah. It looks more like they went down the coast, then went back up the coast. I mean, could be.
Yeah, like they reached like southern Mexico, cut across the interior using the river networks, and then started going back up.
Correct.
Eventually reaching the Mississippi, or just heading up the Atlantic coast.
That's right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I don't know that that's what happened, but I'm just saying, looking at its distribution, it gives you a different possible perspective.
Yeah, and even like in Florida, a lot of canoes, even going back to the archaic. What's interesting is, like we've mentioned before, these canoe parking lots, those are confirmed for Florida during the archaic, and they continue until contact. And we see the exact same thing in Wisconsin. And so at least in the interior, presumably not just for North America, but for South America, like it's a canoe-based world in the interior. And so I'm thinking, there could be like hundreds of these things like still out there in lake beds.
Or they could have rotted and they were once out. But I think it's interesting.
That's important to consider.
Yeah, and then what's also interesting, the one for South America, is it also shows reed floats and then also sailing rafts made of balsa wood. So there's more even going on than just different dugout canoes.
Oh yeah,
and also they have plank canoes too in the South. It's not showing that here because I think they're actually further south. And I've also seen it, which is an interesting thing when I was looking. Of course, they're more historical, not thousands of years ago, but they take, and I don't know if it was on purpose or if it's because the trees were too small, but they take two smaller trees and cut the halves out and then make a seam along the center. So it's two like half dugout canoes of smaller trees makes one big dugout canoe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which that's not exactly the same as those plank boats where they have several planks. This is just two big dugout logs put together and then, in a sense, with rope and tar or whatever, sewed up,
lashed together.
Yeah, latched together, exactly. So it lacks. So it's still a dugout canoe, sort of. It's like two of them, which, like I said, could be to accompany smaller trees, but wanting a bigger boat.
Yeah. No,
Anyways,
and thank you for like just putting this diagram, these maps together, especially the dugout one, because that's an important thing to note, especially when dealing with these older cultures using boating technology. Just because a paper will mention they might have made dugout canoes or confirmed to make dugout canoes, there are a lot of ways to style and utilize a dugout canoe besides just having a basic hollowed out log. A lot of time, like we see here, you have the stylized front. Sometimes they're carved with animal head figurines or other scenes from the oral traditions or mythology.
I agree.
Or like you just mentioned, lashing multiple canoes together. Like if you're going on a trade expedition or something like that, like extra security and extra stability.
Speaking of which, I've also seen too where speaking you reminded me, that I've seen where they have one dugout canoe with logs tied to or latched to the sides, two smaller logs to help the stability. Speaking of which,
like you
and
could have
probably helps it float more when you put more weight in. So there's a lot of variation that was to make these boats even better. So let's go down to the reading.
The earliest stone axes in North America date to around 10,000 years ago, and Adzes date from 10,000 to 8,000 years ago. Edge-ground stone axes from Brazil in South America are among the oldest in the Americas, dating between 10,000 and 11,000 years ago. But Adzes, called Celts, only dating from around 2,700 years ago.
Right. So like I was saying, that kind of makes a problem. Even though they have an axe to chop a tree down, they're not making the things for dugouts until under 3,000.
Yeah, and even for those who are still like wrapping that concept, like what's the difference between an axe and an adze?
Right.
No, an axe is just for chopping wood. That's its main intention, just chopping wood, get the tree down, take the bark off, whatever. The adze is your other tool that you're using to hollow out. And so that does pose a problem if it's axes but not the adzes.
Which, and the reason I bring that up is an important fact, because we need to know that North America had them 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But South America didn't get them till 3,000 years ago. Well, then that makes the whole boat by, the Kelp hypothesis at least would have to be tweaked, because it doesn't sound real justified or reason to say, well, it has to be dugouts, because dugouts sound like they only showed up 3,000 years ago, or at least evidence to back that we know they could. I'm not saying it's impossible. They could have made a dugout with an axe, but it's not super likely.
No, because you would think if they had this long tradition of making dugout canoes, they would have invested in a proper toolkit to easily make them. Like your axes, your adzes, and your gouges.
Exactly.
So that suggests to me, they're only investing in the axe technology. Maybe they're doing something different with boats. Maybe it's not strictly dugouts.
Right. You could make a plank
composite
boat,
or reed.
Or you could make rafts, which we know even when Spanish came, they had shit tons of rafts. And it's most likely they used rafts to go from at least Mexico down to Ecuador or Peru and back for trade. So, and they have balsa wood, which is super easy to cut. You ever cut balsa wood? Super easy. Light, floats real well. Of course, people don't know balsa wood floats for about 2 years and then stops work well. And then as it keeps going, it gets waterlogged because it's like a sponge compared to regular wood. And then it basically doesn't work. And it also degrades pretty easily. So even if my point is, they could have used balsa wood trees and done the Kelp highway hypothesis, but with balsa log rafts, that there's no way they would last. Do you know what I'm saying? So it wouldn't show up at all.
Yeah, and so this preservation problem just keeps coming back.
The preservation. So it makes it for me, I went from feeling stronger about South America and the Kelp highway hypothesis. Now it's feeling kind of loose, like. I don't feel super. I do believe it happened in the north. Do I believe it happened in the south? I don't feel as good about it now.
Yeah, because
I don't care what anyone says, unless they can show me more reasons to believe stronger. I don't have a super amount of confidence. But like I said, it's not impossible. But remember, it is possible that people boated around the whole planet. That doesn't mean it actually did that. So.
Yeah, or like, Graham claims like having people sailing around the planet in the Ice Age.
Well, and he'll say, well, it's not impossible. That doesn't mean it's probable.
Yeah, and
So
just because you lack the evidence doesn't make it probable that it happened.
well, then it has to be true until you prove it not true. It's not like innocent until proven guilty. A theory is not proven until it's proven.
Yeah.
And the more facts you add to it, then the more it's proven. But if the facts keep taking away, like I feel boats along the South America start looking like not as supported as I first thought they were. The more I look, the less confident I'm feeling. So
yeah, no, that's the same with me. Like knowing that they didn't have like a dedicated woodworking toolkit,
right?
No adzes, gouges,
right?
Not even much investment into metallurgy. Like
that starts even when they had metallurgy, they didn't dedicate themselves to those things. So once again, you're like, certainly at a certain point they did. 1,000 years, yes.
Yeah, but like towards the later end.
Yeah, way later.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah. So telling me that 12,000 years ago they're on boats. I don't feel good at that no more.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not Dugout canoes.
Probably not. I mean, it's not impossible. Probably not.
No, but it looks unlikely.
It looks less
really
likely.
Unlikely. Yeah.
So go ahead and read the what is likely.
Okay. Prehistoric links between Mesoamerica and the Andes have been suggested on several occasions. Early Mesoamerican and Ecuadorian pottery styles show some similarities, both in technique and motifs. Likewise, similarities in the early burial styles, so-called shaft tombs, present in Ecuador and Western Mesoamerica have been pointed out. Even the origins of the Peripecha people in Michoacan have been suggested as lying in South America. However, none of these proposals are widely accepted by specialists. Many more widely accepted is the influence of South American metallurgy on Mesoamerica. South American metallurgy itself can be divided into two traditions. One in Peru, southern Ecuador, and Bolivia, which used copper, tin, silver, gold, and arsenic in various alloys with a variety of uses, and a second in Colombia and southern Central America, the so-called intermediate area, which relied on gold and copper for largely artistic rather than utilitarian purposes.
Right, so you're not utilitarian, so they're not making a lot of adzes and gouges.
And even then, like just that social factor, like as soon as these people start getting copper, it shows there's not one pathway to go down. Like as soon as you get copper, you just don't start immediately making utilitarian tools, then shift to ornaments. You can start with the ornaments.
See, you understand? Putting the cold copper culture into context with this, the old thinking that, well, you start utilitarian and then you turn to, ornamentation. No, you shouldn't.
That didn't happen here with the intermediate area. They started they started ornamental.
Correct.
Up with old copper, it looked like they were doing both, like at least from that huge mining phase in Isle Royale. They had both from that outset.
But see, it helps later that extra stuff like this to support your thinking that it's not like some, given thing that just happens that you start, utilitarian and become later, artistic.
It just shows that different areas and different people have different priorities for the materials they're using for what they want to make those.
Exactly.
The metallurgical tradition of Western Mesoamerica, though geographically closer to the intermediate zone, is much more in form and function to the southern Ecuadorian tradition. The form and method of creating interlocking metal rings is identical in the two traditions, and even their archaeological context, placed around the cranium in burials, is remarkably similar. Fishhooks, needles, and tweezers also appear in both traditions. However, the wax casting tradition of the intermediate area, which spread to other parts of Mesoamerica, also proved influential in the Western Mesoamerican context, such as in the creation of copper-gold alloy bells. Axe monies refer to copper artifacts found in both Western Mesoamerica and the northern Andes. Based on ethnohistorical, archaeological, chemical, and metallurgical analyses, the scholars Hosler, Lechtman, and Holm have argued for their use in both regions, which are separated by thousands of miles through trade. In contrast to napis, bow tie or card-shaped metal objects, which appear in the archaeological record only in the northern Andean coastal regions, axe monies are found in both Mesoamerican and Andean cultural zones. More specifically, it is argued that the system of money first arose on the north coast of Peru and Ecuador in the early 2nd millennium CE. In both regions, copper was smelted, likely by family units, and hammered into thin, axe-shaped forms and bundled in multiples of 5, usually 20. As they are often found in burials, it is likely that in addition to their presumed economic use, they also had ceremonial value.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, I want to add something that's pretty interesting. At least I think it is. In the research that Monette Bebo-Reinhardt has done tracking copper artifacts around the Americas, she's noted a style found around the Great Lakes and with Mississippian items that looks identical to that axe money form being produced at that same time. And she's theorized, based on the trade networks that were available for the Mississippians back then, how like they were in contact with the Southwestern tribes, and those groups were in contact with Mesoamerican tribes.
Right.
She's theorized that there was a trade link, and that's how these groups with Cahokia and further north were getting this axe money form.
I agree. That's what I'm totally in agreement that these people were not isolated.
No, and even here, like I had mentioned earlier with the crescents, like how it's not just me that's noticed this. Other researchers have noticed how that they look related to burial and cache contexts, especially in New England, because that's where we have the most confirmed evidence for their context. It's burials and caches. We see a similar thing here. There's an iconic style, and you're finding it in certain contexts.
Yeah.
But there's also a possibility for another use, this financial, monetary for trade.
Right.
So that's interesting. It is known through early Spanish accounts that native Ecuadorians used balsa rafts fitted with sails to travel along the northern Andean coast to trade. Indeed, the first king of Lambayeque, where axe monies are known to have been manufactured, is said in ethno-historical accounts to have arrived in the city by raft. So the king is coming in by raft. The Chincha of Peru and Mantero of Ecuador in particular are good candidates for the origin of many of these traders. Furthermore, there is solid archaeological evidence for the trade of spondylus shells, which can be gathered between the Gulf of Guayaquil in Ecuador and the Gulf of Mexico in the Andean highlands during the Chauvin culture. Furthermore, contemporary accounts from the Balsas River in western Mexico report that the fathers and grandfathers of local men had traded with canoe-borne traders who sometimes spent as long as half a year in the area. However, there is as yet no firm archaeological evidence of the presence of either Ecuadorians in Mexico or vice versa. This trading system was therefore ancient. It is suggested by Dewin and Hosler that these traders operated along the Andean coast from Colombia in the north to Chile in the south as early as 1000 BCE. Using mathematical models, they demonstrate that it is hypothetically possible for balsa rafts to sail not just along coastal routes, but in the open ocean between Ecuador and Michoacan. An earlier proposal for the route by Coe suggests a more coastal route for trade. Hosler suggests that traders from South America introduced metallurgical techniques into western Mexico in two waves. First between 800 and 1250 CE, and second between 1250 and the Spanish conquest. It was
right. And the first one, the 800 to 1200, that's in the time when I told you the Chichevan languages went and met the Polynesians in some way. So we do know that they did have rafts, for sure.
Yeah, that's one confirmed boat style, rafts.
We don't know how they met, but like I said, it's not impossible that maybe they didn't meet on land, but in the water.
Yeah, if their rafts were large enough, and like they made a planned expedition to head out there for like a religious purpose. Maybe they were looking for a trade route. Maybe they were just curious.
And also,
like you can think
they says they have sails, and we do know that the wind currents and water currents go towards that area. So when the Polynesians were coming the other way, they're going actually against the wind. So you could see where I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just saying loose speculation that because of the wind currents, even if it wasn't intentional, you could get blown off and end up towards where the Polynesians were at also.
And I was thinking about that earlier, like somebody experimenting with sailing along the Peruvian coast and getting blown out to sea.
Right. So I'm just saying, if they only had balsa rafts with no sails, well then that changes things, because that means they're on or whatever. The currents also go that way, but the fact that it's also how the wind blows would mean that if you have a sail, you could get blown out. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And again, I don't know if this is how it happened either, but if they went out there with a team, like multiple rafts, rafts, and maybe a couple of them had sails. If the South Americans had innovated the sail on their own, you could presumably they're bringing supplies with them if they're heading out there.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Well, and there's even evidence. Not evidence. There is stories of a king or chieftain sending out 20,000. Who knows of how real this is? But sending out 20,000 rafts to go conquer some land out in the water. So once again, I'm just saying we don't know that they actually did that, but the story is they went out and came back and supposedly brought things that were not from, their current area. Is that, just a story or whatever? I don't know, but it's certainly because you were saying about rafts. Yeah, because if you have one raft, okay, maybe. But if someone really did send 20,000 rafts, them eventually finding something is not out of the question.
Yeah, and if they're heading out there with a team and they're bringing supplies, especially rope, which is like the necessary if you're even thinking about heading onto water for any amount of time, you could lash those rafts together if you know where the ocean's going to be calm for a while. It's like you could have this little raft platform, and then at some point, you see these people coming in with a different type of boat, and they're not from your tribe, they're not from your people.
Right.
And then you have this early exchange and like this DNA exchange that we see going on.
Yeah. Like I said, 10% of Native Americans from the Chichepan, language in northern Colombia end up in Easter Island.
Yeah. So
something happened.
Pre-Columbian rafts plied the Pacific coast of South America for trade from about 1000 BCE and possibly much earlier.
100 BCE.
Oh, yeah. Okay. From about 100 BCE and possibly much earlier. Well, I'm going to stop there for a second. I'd accidentally said 1000 BCE because I'm thinking about this book. It's a Spanish book written in the Americas. It's in Spanish, and it talks about this theory that even like thousands of years ago, like to the earliest civilizations of Peru and Ecuador, that they had rafts with sails. And this researcher, he thinks they did, and this is why we see so much similarity, not just with metal, but with pottery, with ritual styles, and other items between South America, especially the coast, and Central and Mesoamerica, heading up into like the Aztec area.
I agree, certainly.
So and
it could have been also people from like the Tlingit area going down to California, and the other people coming from South America up to California end up with a cultural exchange. Somehow the potato ends up in off of almost Alaska over in Canada. I mean, what? We know the potato comes from South America.
Or I'll give you an example from my side of things, from my research. Squash, Peppo squash, this like tiny native gourd. Its native territory is in the Ohio, Mississippi, and Illinois confluence area. It's a bit northwest of Kentucky. Well, that's where the best evidence for early proto-agriculture in North America comes from. It's from that area. Well, what's interesting, all the way up in Maine, during the Middle Archaic, 4400 BCE, central Maine, they found a Laurentian site that's named the Sharrow site, and they excavated down several feet, and a few feet under the ground, like between a few feet and 5 feet, they found preserved squash rind. How is that, how's that getting up there? 4400 BCE. It doesn't even grow up there. That's like pine forest.
Yeah.
Squash doesn't grow up there. So that's just another example of thousands of years ago in the Americas, people are exchanging goods.
Absolutely.
And not just stone and copper, but perishable goods. So that's important to keep in mind.
I agree.
Whether we're talking about South America, North America, Central America, or anywhere else in the world, that you can have organic items being traded back and forth that won't survive.
I agree.
The pre-Columbian rafts plied the Pacific coast of South America for trade from about 100 BCE and possibly much earlier. The 16th century descriptions by the Spanish of the rafts used by Native Americans along the sea coasts of Peru and Ecuador has incited speculation about the seamanship of the Indians, the seaworthiness of their rafts, and possibility that they undertook long ocean-going voyages. None of the prehistoric rafts have survived, and the exact characteristics of their construction and the geographic geographical extent of their voyages are uncertain. It is likely that traders using rafts, constructed of balsa wood logs, voyaged as far as Mexico and introduced metallurgy to the civilizations of that country. Balsa is the Spanish word for raft. The use of rafts for commerce on the coasts of Peru and Ecuador, from northern Chile to southern Colombia, continued until the late 19th century, long after the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire, 1532 to 1572. Although the fidelity of these rafts to their prehistoric ancestors is uncertain. The Kon-Tiki expedition was a 1947 journey by raft across the Pacific Ocean from South America to the Polynesian island. The raft was named Kon-Tiki after the Incan god Viracocha, for whom Kon-Tiki was said to be an old name. The Kon-Tiki expedition involved a small team who went to Peru, where, with the help, they constructed the raft out of balsa logs and other native materials in an indigenous style, as recorded in illustrations by Spanish conquistadors. The trip began on April 28, 1947, sailing the raft for 101 days over 6,900 kilometers, 4,300 miles across the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, doing that just on a raft across the Pacific Ocean before smashing into a reef at Raroya in the Tuamotus in French Polynesia on August 7, 1947. Between 1966 and 1973, Spanish explorer Vital Alzar led 3 expeditions to cross the Pacific Ocean by raft. La Pacifica in 1966, a simple raft. La Balsa in 1970, a balsa wood and hemp rope built structure. And Las Balsas in 1973. Traveling from Ecuador, South America, to Australia, the first expedition failed, but the second and third succeeded, both setting the record for the longest known raft voyages in history: 13,800 kilometers, 8,600 miles, and 14,000 kilometers, 8,700 miles, respectively. Like, those distances are incredible.
Right?
Just to put it lightly, like sailing across the entire Pacific and living to tell the tale. Like, that is incredible.
Right. So it shows that certainly they were seaworthy. But as I already talked about, saying something could happen doesn't mean it did happen.
No, and just because these modern experiments worked, and you have to keep in mind they had like oversight for these, like in case something went wrong, way back when, 1,000, 2,000, however many thousand years ago. If something like this went on, a group of people with a balsa raft heading out into the Pacific, they don't have that huge oversight. If something goes wrong, you better figure out a way to fix your canoe or deal with the person on your watercraft, canoe, raft, whatever, or you're probably not going to make it home.
Yep. So, but it is good because these show that we shouldn't think of them as just primitive and ineffective. But like I said, also we need to be reasonable and say, well, just because someone proved it's possible doesn't mean that is what happened. So you have to have somewhere in there has to be some reasoned thinking, critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. The oldest dugout canoes known currently in the Americas is in Florida, dating to 8,000 years ago, or 8,000 years old. Also from Florida's Aquila River was found a possible canoe fragment dating to almost 10,000 years ago, 9,960 years ago. And the next oldest is from Wisconsin at 5,200 years old. When addressing the Kelp Highway hypothesis, most think of passing northern glaciers, but think that once these were passed, the rest of the Americas was wide open. And as we have evidence of ancient watercraft dating from 8,000 to 5,000 years ago in North America, similar evidence must also be in South America. However, the oldest possible ancient watercraft from Ecuador dates to 3,000 to 3,200 years old, limited to representations in ceramic miniatures.
Right. So no actual logs.
No, and you have to keep the environment in mind too. That place that'll eat up any organics.
Right. So, but I'm saying we do need to also remember that we need to be careful in our thinking because we don't have direct evidence to say, oh, there we go.
Yeah. Dugout canoes are found in the Amazon by its indigenous residents. How far they go back is unknown. Ancient Maya dugout canoe found in Mexico could be more than 1,000 years old, found in freshwater pool. The canoe is tentatively dated to between CE 830 and 950, near the end of the Maya civilization's classical zenith, when dozens of cities across present-day southern Mexico and Central America thrived amid major human achievements in mathematics, writing, and art. The extensive extensive trade networks of the ancient Maya contributed largely to the success of their civilization, spanning 3 millennia. Maya canoes were dugout vessels constructed from a single trunk. The Aztecs are known to have raised the sides of their canoes with planks, and it is probable that the Maya did the same, as this allows more cargo to be carried and prevents swamping. They were certainly technologically capable of doing this. There appears to have been 2 types of Maya canoe: a seagoing type with a raised prow and stern, as seen in the Chichen Itza mural, and a type with a flattened platform at the prow and stern, which the models depict. There is currently only one known archaeological example of a pre-Columbian Maya canoe dating to the early Classic between CE 300 and 600. A Maya canoe paddle has also been found dating to the late Classic, specifically between CE 680 and 880. The Maya also used rafts or balsas, as the Dresden Codex and a gold disc from Chichen Itza depict them. These are also known to have been used in other areas of Mesoamerica from as early as Olmec times. Maya royal control and the wide distribution of foreign and domestic commodities for both populations, subsistence, and social affluence are hallmarks of the Maya, visible throughout much of the iconography found in the archaeological record. In particular, moderately long-distance trade of foreign commodities from the Caribbean and Gulf coasts provided the larger inland Maya cities with the resources they needed to sustain settled population levels in the several thousands. Though the ruling class essentially controlled the trade economy, a middle merchant class supervised import and export from cities and trade ports. Not much is known of the Maya merchant class. However, merchants of royal lineage are sometimes represented in the iconography. Notably, a canoe paddle often accompanies the royal merchant depictions, signifying their association with marine resources. Water lilies are also a recognizable feature of Maya iconography, appearing on ceramics and murals in landlocked cities like Palenque, where the lilies cannot grow, further indicating the important political symbolism of water connections. The dugout style canoes of the Maya and other small watercraft are also represented in various codices, sometimes ferrying royal figures or deities. The rich tradition of maritime trade has continued into the modern era, exemplified by the resource exploitation of the coastal lagoons and quay locations along the Caribbean coast of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras.
Yes.
No.
And then this has to do with the boat burial.
Pre-Hispanic canoe or wampo burial in northwestern Patagonia, Argentina. Well, yeah, you can see it there on the left-hand side of that excavation. Yeah.
And you notice it's in pieces. It's not like a full boat, but you can tell that that's what it was.
Yeah.
But it just shows it's so hard to keep stuff preserved.
No, in South America, especially once you head inland in the rainforest, like that stuff, that rainforest, that'll just eat up any organics. It's actually a pretty big challenge just to find like anything out there. And so like those people finding that dugout canoe in the freshwater pond, those are your best places to look. Like these like stable, low oxygen environments.
Right.
The burial of individual 3 at the Nuan Antug site, a young adult woman with a pottery grave offering characteristic of the late pottery period and dated to 880 years ago, is an indirect burial in a wooden structure. The form and design comprise a wooden wampo or small canoe, or a symbolic representation of one, a metaphor in current and historical Mapuche society for the voyage to the final abode of the dead, located beyond a water body which must be crossed in a boat. This is the first kind of a burial in a canoe structure in Argentinian Patagonia, and the most southern example on the whole continent. In the southern cone of the Americas, specifically in northwestern Patagonia, Argentina, and La Araucanía, Chile, the historical, ethnographic, and archaeological record mention all 3 modes of terrestrial burial. They describe the coffin canoe being placed in trees or hung from posts, while some are covered with soil to create tumuli. The earliest records suggest canoe burials in excavated graves, areas of social importance.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting they put them in trees.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty
what?
That's significant. Like these people are like they value canoes so much they're burying people in trees and
With
canoes.
the canoe.
Yeah.
Like that's interesting. So this next one comes close to the area once again that we talked about already, the people that, not these people specifically, but just a little bit north of them, but this is a Chichibon language family, group, and they're famous for making the golden raft, which I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one. I haven't spent much time with the Musica's culture or the items they produced, but I have seen this one.
And like I said, this is related to the Chichevan languages, which we already found out came actually from, in a sense, southern Central America, down 6,000 years ago down to Colombia, and then went back to the Mayan area by 5,600, the language. So go ahead and read it.
The Musica Raft, CE 1200 to 1500, sometimes referred to as the Golden Raft of El Dorado or the Pasca Raft, is a pre-Columbian votive piece created by the Musica, an Andean people of Colombia in the eastern ranges of the Colombian Andes that established multiple chiefdoms in the region.
Oh, chiefdoms?
Yeah, chief. And earlier it framed the Musica as a confederacy, like a
Right.
confederacy of different chieftains.
Right.
That's interesting.
Which I told you before, is I feel like there's another thing that I said could be happening in a sense at Poverty Point, or even relating to what's happening in the old copper culture. The reason why it may be hard to understand, because it's not one paramount chieftain, but a confederacy of chieftains.
Yeah.
Because
And that's
I told you, a confederacy of chieftains often operates more egalitarian and less prominence. That would make it harder to see in the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that confederacy idea is something I've been exploring with the old copper complex.
Which I think actually could almost help explain
Yeah.
what could be happening, because you have all these, as you show, these different, kind of regions doing stuff. That would be easier to explain as a chieftain confederacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
Certainly not
operates.
just one paramount chieftain.
Yeah, and what's good is we have historical evidence for confederacies in that area, like the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the Eastern
Exactly.
Great Lakes. That was around during colonial times.
Right.
And
I think it was almost a response to colonial times.
Yeah, like
but
you have
but
these
yes, but the concept wasn't colonial. The concept was pre-existing, but colonial inspired that happening. But I do agree with you that, like, as I've tried to show you, and generally those kind of chieftains are not like the normal what people think of as chieftains, where it's easy to see who's the elite, because they're run different. They're not run with just one elite makes all the rules. So
like with the OCC case, like just around Lake Superior, that's where you find like the best made artifacts, the largest ones, a lot more items up there with silver inclusions, and a lot more jewelry, pendants, bracelets, beads, things like that.
Right.
Like that stuff mostly clusters around Lake Superior and diminishes as you go south, especially the jewelry and stuff like that, until later on.
Yeah,
You head over into the east, you get less copper, and the people out there, they're using stone, bone, and antler, but a lot of their forms mimic what we see around Lake Superior.
Right. Which, like I said, to me would also explain too, because Adena, the mound builders, the first one in Ohio, starts off with a loose kind of early or simplified chieftain. And then it becomes rapidly more by the Hopewell, and then it becomes a paramount chieftain by the Mississippian. But there's nothing to think that somehow it was invented, the concept, by the Adena. I feel like you're showing that there might have been a loose confederacy chieftain that, in a sense, the Adena takes that idea for itself, and then the Hopewell expands on, and then the Mississippian, turns it into a paramount, king or whatever.
Yeah, and from what I've been researching, it seems like that process got kickstarted by the OCC around Lake Superior. That's where we find this original investment in ornamental copperworking, and that stuff only picks up after that.
At least right now, that would be my. Yeah. I'm opening to to change, but I would say that's how I see it. What I've seen the evidence and understanding, like I've been trying to show you, that how people's understanding of these concepts are too fixed.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways for people to organize themselves.
Yes,
that's one of the reasons I enjoy studying the OCC, because it really gets you thinking. It really gets you thinking about logistics, trade networks, how people can structure themselves, because this is all stuff that we're still figuring out. We don't know how they structured themselves.
I agree.
We have to rely on the archaeology. We don't know what language they spoke, and so it really gets people thinking critically. And you can take that critical thinking and apply it to all these other areas outside of North America, like what we're talking about here, Central and South America. So that's pretty cool.
So gold was used in Central America.
Gold was was used in Central America by the 1st century CE and was spiritually and symbolically important to pre-Columbian peoples. The countries of the Isthmus, Costa Rica, Panama, and Colombia emerged as a single gold-working region that shared styles and methodology, such as the use of lost wax casting instead of hammering. Metalworking in the region began with objects for religious rituals and royalty, rather than as tools, weapons, or currency. This symbolic use from the outset established a precedent for metalworking throughout the region's history. The Muisca people, also known as the Chibcha, were situated at 9,000 feet elevation in the eastern Andes of Colombia, near modern-day Bogota, the town of Tanja, and Lake Guatavita. While most Muisca villages had a chief and priests, the Muisca were generally an egalitarian agricultural people.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I not tell you that you can have a chieftain and still be egalitarian? So when they say something is hunter-gatherer, egalitarian, thus it can't be chieftain, I'm like, you haven't read enough, I think.
Yeah. Or like we're seeing here, having agriculture with egalitarianism. When it's not usually framed like that, it's usually framed
and also
as
having a
chieftains.
chieftain.
Yeah.
Don't you just love when reality doesn't fit in your box?
God, man, we're gonna have to make a bunch more cookie cutters just from this one episode.
But like I said to you, do you get to what I've told you before? Because I've done all this extra reading and heard these cultures, when people try to tell me, oh, this stuff is impossible, and I'm like, dude, there's cultures that do what you just said can't happen.
Yeah. They made pottery and textiles and mined emeralds and salt, but they lacked the gold and beeswax needed to create their signature gold pieces. For those raw materials, they bartered with neighboring peoples. Gold was not reduced to the use of the elite or the Muisca chiefs, and was not.
You know, why is that important? Copper, you could just change the metal and say copper in the old copper culture was not limited to the chiefs of the copper culture, right? Couldn't you just switch that? And then all of a sudden their claims that, well, because copper wasn't limited to some group, there couldn't be chiefs. Like the Mexica proved that you might need to rethink
you can have a widespread exotic metal and the chief uses it, but so does everyone else.
Right?
Not only that, there's a chief in an egalitarian society.
Right?
Go figure.
You love this, right?
Well, no, because it exposes like flaws and outdated thinking, that it has to be these rigid structures. It can't be fluid, like you've shown multiple times.
Right. And that's why I said, and I told you before, I don't really try to argue with academics, but I don't feel like if they think they can argue with me, they're going to enjoy it as much as they think.
Yeah.
Because I am not ignorant.
No.
I'm not a Graham Hancock that just comes up with wild things. The reason I challenge the things you say is because I've read other things that challenge the things you say.
Okay, where was I? And it was not the principal object of prestige, as it was mainly used for religious offering purposes. Instead, all Muisca families decorated their doors and windows with gold objects. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So it's not, just because you have a chief doesn't mean he's the one that has to hoard everything.
Right? So you like that because, like I said, doesn't that make you feel a little bit more confident that maybe the OCC or the Old Copper Complex could have involved confederacy of chieftains that didn't do these practices of hoarding things?
Yeah, that's a possibility now.
Yeah.
Well, it was something I was exploring, but knowing that there were other groups out there like doing this, like breaking this classic rigid model, like, oh, you can't be a settled farmer and be egalitarian, and if you're egalitarian, you definitely can't have chiefs.
Right?
Well,
or like I said with the Tulupia, if you have a chief, you can't also have a big man because big man's before chiefs. Like, well, who told this culture? Because they're doing it.
It's why this is exactly why it's good to read and just expose yourself to what other cultures around the world are doing.
That is why I think the way I do, because I've absolutely done that. Like I told you too, that's why I said before, I want you to see that everything is not so different. Because when you do that, you stop being so ethnocentric, so racist, so, because you get a broader perspective.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to do things, and a lot of those ways have worked for thousands of years and others haven't. But it's, it doesn't mean like some of those ways are better than others. It's just just familiarize yourself with the different cultures of the world, see how they do things, how they live their lives, what they like, what they don't like. It's like, like adding more tools to your toolbox. It gives you more info to analyze prehistoric cultures.
Exactly,
Come
because
to a more grounded and realistic idea of what they could have been like.
yep.
Around 1500 BCE, groups of agrarians with ceramic traditions came to the region from the lowlands. They had permanent housing and stationary camps and worked with salty water to extract salt. In Zipacon, there is evidence of agriculture and ceramics. The oldest settlement of the highlands dates to 1270 BCE. Musica migrated in the formative stage between 1000 BCE and CE 500. Between 800 BCE and 500 BCE, a second wave of migrants came to the highlands. Their presence is identified by multicolor ceramics, housing, and farms. These groups were still in residence upon the arrival of the Spanish invaders. The Musica may have integrated with more ancient inhabitants, but the Musica were the ones who molded the cultural profile and the social and political organization. Their language, a dialect of Chibcha, was very similar to those peoples of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, Kagi, Ixca, Vra, Canquamo, and the Sierra Nevada de Del Coyo, Koki, Uwa. The Musica language is part of the Chibcha linguistic family, which in turn belongs to the Macro-Chibchan group. The Chibcha linguistic family includes several indigenous languages of Central America and northwestern South America. In prehistoric times, in the Andean civilizations called pre-ceramic, the population of northwestern South America migrated through the Darien Gap between the Isthmus of Panama and Colombia. Other Chibchan languages are spoken in southern Central America and the Musica, and related indigenous groups took their language with them into the heart of Colombia, where they comprised the Musica Confederation, a cultural group.
See, confederation, right? Because it's a confederation of chieftains, as we talked about, which people don't think is possible because they think of chieftains like we think of kings. It's like that doesn't have to be the only way it can present itself.
Yeah, and like you've shown, there are multiple ways you can structure your chiefdom, and it doesn't.
That's the biggest problem I think I have whenever people say chieftains can be or can't be. I'm like, you do realize that the variation of chieftain is broad.
Yeah, chieftain can be small, it can be large, it can be agriculture-based, water-based. It can be led by a man, by a woman. It can be led by a family or a group of families, a group of individuals.
Exactly. And a group of chieftains.
There are so many ways to structure your chiefdom. And then there's different ways to bring those chieftains and tribes together to form your confederacy, whether it's in South America or North America during the fur trade, further back in time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A rudimentary boat shape with a pointed bow, as shown in a pre-Columbian raft model near Arica, Chile, age unknown. The model appears to be lashed together, which one would assume replicated the original. The Yagan people of Tierra del Fuego were the southernmost population in the world at the time of European contact. They were known as the Canoe Indians, and their bark canoes were attractive and sophisticated, more so than the bark canoes of Australia, but perhaps not as refined as those of North America. The bark canoes of the nearby Alacaluf people living on the Strait of Magellan in Chile were similar. These were big canoes, typically 24 to 26 feet, and occasionally more than 30. So again, here you have another canoe style that's not dugout bark.
Correct. And I showed where those people are. Do you see how they're the little red all the way at the bottom?
Yep, right at the southern tip.
Right.
Yeah.
Like way down there. Now,
and
their stone tools is believed to be found on the Falkland Islands, but there's some question of when because at some point missionaries took those people and stuck them on the Falkland Islands, supposedly to save them, really because it's easy then to take over their area,
Yeah,
they put them on a reservation, kind of an idea. But I'm saying so there, and then I've showed where Eastern Island is. It's pretty far, right? And then the Galapagos Island. I put these islands because if they had boats and were traveling, you would think that they would get to them. The fact that the DNA shows up on Easter Island, which is at least, if not 2 to 3 times farther than the Galapagos, but there's no one shows up on the Galapagos, I find to be questionable. And then certainly the Falkland Islands are pretty close down there. Those people are known as the canoe people, and yet there's not a lot of evidence to support that they went there. I feel like, like I said, less confidence about the boats doing far travel except the coast.
Yeah, and even if you consider the sea level thousands of years ago when people were down there.
Right. Well, the Falkland
It's like
Islands,
just not having a lot of evidence for people on the Falkland Islands. That's interesting.
right? And the Galapagos, and then
Yeah,
Easter
that too.
Island. But anyway, so because I wanted to make a map to kind of help you, see where these places are in relation.
Or like we talked about earlier, that king who had all these rafts head out into
Right.
islands. Like
Right.
I could like for me, like if he's heading out like west of Peru to an island chain, like for me, it'd be more realistic to have them go to the Galapagos, seeing how close they
It would
are.
be,
But
right,
not
and the
having
fact
a
that
lot
there's
of
nothing
barely any
there.
evidence for people there, and more
None.
evidence for people at Easter Island. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting and odd at the same time.
It is. So go ahead and read the stuff.
Reconsidering pre-Columbian human colonization in the Galapagos Islands, Republic of Ecuador. 50 years ago, Heyerdahl and Skajorsvold, 1956 and 1990, collected material from 5 archaeological sites in the Galapagos Islands. They retained earthenwares of possible pre-Columbian age, or pre-Columbian origin, and discarded ceramic, metal, and glass artifacts post-dating the arrival of the Spanish in CE 1535. Consequently, they argued that each site was formed as a result of a series of discard events from unrelated short-term occupations extending from the pre-Columbian to the historical era, and that the earthenwares represented occasional visits by fishermen from pre-Columbian Peru and Ecuador. In 2005, we re-excavated the sites and collected all the excavated materials. Our results show that each class of material, irrespective of age or origin, were distributed spatially and stratigraphically in the same pattern, contradicting the former assumption of multiple unrelated occupations. We reject the palimpsest model in favor of the null hypothesis of single-phase site occupation. Analysis of putatively pre-Columbian pottery using optically stimulated luminescence dating indicates that it is mostly of historical age. Radiocarbon dating confirms that the archaeological sites are younger than 16th century. Research on sedimentary cores shows probable anthropogenic impacts restricted to the last 500 years. We conclude that there was no human occupation in the Galapagos Islands until the historical era.
Right.
See, and right here, this touches on what I said earlier about researchers just intentionally ignoring stuff. Like you have this pottery that looks old, but it's associated with all this other stuff, and so they just went ahead, got rid of all the historical stuff, but kept
glass.
the
Yeah,
pottery.
forget that.
Yeah, even though it's all mixed together, this stuff's older. That's not that's not how it should be done. You shouldn't just like ignore things like that. That should have been really considered.
Right, and that, but I'm trying to offer it because I'm in a sense questioning. My first thought that they must have had tons of travel, and of course, you would think they would have got to, if they had tons of travel with boats, they would have certainly got to all these islands, and yet there isn't that evidence. So, like I told you, after doing more research, I became less convinced that that happened, and more convinced that it was certainly might have gone along the coast, maybe, but less convinced of the Kelp hypothesis for South America, and then even less convinced that there was lots of, hopping to these different islands when that just is not supported by evidence. Go ahead and read the next one.
The Yagan, also called Yaghan.
No, the ancient Rapa Nui geomes.
Okay. Rapa Nui, also known as Eastern Island, is one of the most isolated inhabited places in the world and captured the imagination of many owing to the iconic megalithic statues called Moai. Possibility of trans-Pacific voyages of the Americas predating European investigation was investigated by reconstructed the genomic history of the Rapa Nui on the basis of 15 ancient Rapa Nui individuals dated CE 1670 through 1950. Researchers found that these individuals are Polynesian in origin and of Native American admixture, about 10%. That researchers estimate dates to CE 1250 to 1430. Present-day Rapa Nui were found to harbor Native American and European admixture in their genomes. Notably, in that work, Native American admixture, CE 1280 to 1495, was estimated to predate European admixture, CE 1850 to 1895. More recently, Native American admixture was detected not only in present-day individuals from Rapa Nui, but also from Rapa Iti, Tahiti, Palliser, Nukuhiva, North Marquesas, Fatuhiva, South Marquesas, and Manjaviva. In that study, the Native American gene flow in the different islanders was dated between CE 1150, South Marquesas, and CE 1380, Rapa Nui, in line with the date estimated.
Right, so like I said, could be one thing, or it could have gone to one area and then dispersed to the other areas. languages.
The Yagan, also called Yagan, Yamana, Yamana, or Tecanica, are a group of indigenous peoples in the southern cone of South America. Their traditional territory includes the islands south of Isla Grande de Terra del Fuego, extending their presence into Cape Horn, making them the world's southernmost indigenous human population. The Yagan were traditionally nomads and hunter-gatherers who traveled by canoe between islands to collect food. The men hunted sea lions and the women dove to hunt shellfish, or to collect shellfish. They also scavenged whale meat and gathered local vegetation, including berries and mushrooms. The Yagan share some similarities with the more northern Chono and Kawaiskar Alakalaf tribes. These groups share behavioral traits, a traditional canoe-faring hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and physical traits such as short stature, being long-headed, dolichocephalic, and having a low face. Despite these similarities, their languages are completely different. The Yagan language, also known as Yamana, is considered a language isolate. In the 1920s, some Yagan were resettled on Keppel Island and the Falkland Islands by Anglican missionaries in an attempt to preserve the tribe, but they continued to decline in population. The second to last full-blooded Yagan, Emelinda Acuna, died in 2005. The last full-blooded Yagan died in 2022, aged 93, and that was the last native speaker of the Yagan language. The Chono people were an indigenous maritime hunter-gatherer population inhabiting the archipelagos of western Patagonia and southern Chile, from the Chilo archipelago to the Taitao Peninsula, where they pursued a nomadic existence reliant on sewn plank canoes called dalkas for navigating fjords and exploiting coastal resources, including fish, shellfish, sea lions, birds, and occasional beached whales. Their culture emphasized seafaring adaptation to harsh marine environments, with diets supplemented by gathered potatoes and eggs, though much ethnographic knowledge derives from Spanish colonial accounts mediated through Haluche intermediaries, potentially distorting indigenous perspectives. Genetic analyses indicate close affinity to neighboring Kawaiskar populations, situating the Chono within broader Patagonian clines of ancestry, blending local ancient components with northern influences. The group ceased to exist as a distinct entity by the 18th or 19th century, likely due to European-introduced diseases, displacement to missions, and assimilation pressures, rendering them one of the least documented among Patagonia's extinct coastal peoples. A 2022 mitochondrial DNA study analyzed ancient human remains from archaeological sites in the Chonos archipelago, 43 degrees to 47 degrees south, focusing on maritime hunter-gatherers from western Patagonia during the late Holocene. The research sequenced mtDNA from individuals interred in caves like Estero Sur, revealing haplogroup profiles primarily consisting of A2 and D1 subclades common in southern South America, with genetic affinities to other Patagonian groups, such as the Kawaiskar and Yagan, but distinct subhaplogroups, e.g. limited diversity in D1G, suggestive of geographic isolation due to the archipelago's insular environment and maritime lifestyle. These findings indicate low gene flow with continental populations, supporting Chono's characterization as a semi-isolated relict group adapted to fjord and island ecosystems, with archaeological evidence from shell middens and burial contexts dating to approximately 2,500 years before present, confirming a reliance on marine resources without significant archaeological influence from neighboring Mapuche-like groups. The history of the Falkland Islands, approximately 400 kilometers or 250 miles northeast Tierra del Fuego, Argentina, 500 years, with active exploration and colonization only taking place in the 18th century. While Fuegians from Patagonia could have visited the Falklands, the islands were uninhabited when discovered by Europeans. Recent discoveries of arrowheads in Lafonia on the southern half of East Falkland, as well as the remains of a wooden canoe, provide evidence that the Yagan people of Tierra del Fuego may have made the journey to the islands. It is not known if these are evidence of one-way journeys, but there is no known evidence of pre-Columbian buildings or structures. However, it is not certain that the discovery predates arrival of Europeans. In 2021, a paper was published on deposits of marine animal bones, primarily South American sea lion and southern raw copper penguin, on New Island off the coast of West Falkland. At the same site where a quartzite arrowhead made of local stone had been found in 1979. The sites dated to CE 1275 to 1420 and were interpreted as processing or midden sites where marine animals had been butchered. A charcoal spike consistent with anthropogenic anthropogenic causes, i.e. caused by humans, on New Island was also dated to CE 1400. The Yagan people were capable seafarers and are known to have traveled to the Diego Ramirez Islands around 105 kilometers, 65 miles south of Cape Horn, and were suggested to be responsible for the creation of the mounds. Other authors have suggested that the mounds and arrowheads do not provide unambiguous evidence pre-Columbian presence. Archaeological evidence suggests that Trinidad was the first Caribbean island settlement, or islands settled as early as 9,000 to 8,000 BCE. However, the first settlers most likely arrived in Trinidad when it was still attached to South America by land bridges.
Right, because it used to be not in the water.
It was not until about 7,000 to 6,000 BCE, 9,000 to 8,000 years ago, during the early Holocene, that Trinidad became an island rather than part of the mainland due to a significant jump in sea level by about 60 meters.
Which, see, that should help us understand when probably the Darien Gap also became closer to its current status. So, you know what I'm saying? So if it's older than 9,000, we have to assume that walking is a likely path.
Yeah. The conclusion is that Trinidad was the only Caribbean island that could have been colonized by indigenous people from the South American mainland by not traversing hundreds of or thousands of kilometers of the open sea. The earliest major habitation sites discovered in Trinidad are the shell midden deposits of Banwari Trace in St. John, which have been dated between 6,000 and 5,100 BCE, or 8,000 to 7,100 years ago. Both shell middens represent extended deposits of shells discarded by human populations utilizing the crustaceans as a food source and stone and bone tools. They are considered to belong to the Ortoroid archaeological tradition, named after the similar but much more recent Ortoroid site in Mararo, Trinidad. Except for Trinidad, the first Caribbean islands were settled during the Archaic Age, between 3,500 and 3,000 BCE, or 5,500 to 5,000 years ago. Archaeological sites of this period have been located in Barbados, Cuba, Curacao, and St. Martin, followed closely by Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. This settlement phase is often attributed to the Ortoroid culture. However, in the southern Lesser Antilles, particularly Grenada and St. Vincent, evidence for archaic occupation is ephemeral and consists mainly of isolated shell finds rather than established settlements, suggesting these islands may have been largely bypassed by early foragers. The period from CE 650 to 800 saw major cultural, socio-political, and ritual reformulations, which took place both on the mainland and in many Caribbean islands. Although a large number of Caribbean islands were settled during the Archaic and Ceramic ages, some islands were presumably visited much later. Jamaica has no known human settlements until around 1600 CE, while the Cayman Islands show no evidence of settlement before European arrival. It's thought that late in the first millennium BCE and onward, till European contact, the natives of the Pacific coast of Latin America, between Ecuador and Mexico, were trading with those in the Caribbean. 16th century Spanish sailors noted a variety of vessels.
So hold on one second. So the Caribbean itself wasn't isolated either?
No, not at all. Yeah, imagine that. Yeah, so North America wasn't isolated. South America wasn't isolated, at least not entirely. Even Central America around Darien Gap wasn't isolated.
Nope. And the Caribbean wasn't isolated.
And the Caribbean wasn't isolated. And
So
we still have a lot of hunter-gatherers.
has to be isolated.
It's interesting that even late into prehistory, even with a bunch of hunter-gathering tribes across North, Central, and South America, that they're not isolated.
No.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Not only this, look what else they're mentioning. Different boat styles in the Caribbean.
Different boat styles.
Yeah. 16th century Spanish sailors noted a variety of vessels. So they're not just using rafts, basic, simple, and everything from basic to complex ones.
Yep.
They're using dugout canoes, and they're using a composite combination of all these. So that's pretty incredible to me.
Look, it says that Chile's used inflated seals and sea lion hides.
Yeah. So it's not just the boat styles; it's stuff being attached to the boats too.
Yep.
Yeah, like outriggers, sealskin floats. So it really goes to show that just because you're a hunter-gatherer or a simple farmer or egalitarian,
yep.
you can still have chiefs. Just because you're making boats doesn't mean they have to be simple.
Nope.
They can be complex. They can be sophisticated, covered in beautiful decorations and painting and carvings. They can be composite. Rafts with dugouts underneath for extra support, or or outriggers, or outrigger dugout canoe with a sail.
Right.
It really goes to show how sophisticated people can be when given the opportunity.
And it wasn't like it just waited until Europeans, arrived. When they arrived, it was already there.
No. Yeah, they didn't need Europeans to figure out sails. You can figure a sail out from watching clothes dry. But that's just my thinking. Who knows if they did? That's actually a big debate, whether they invented sails on their own, because there are very early depictions from North, Central, and South America that show drawings of people using sails. And the sails look different than the European sails, and they're attached to boats that don't look European.
Yeah.
So, personally, I think they invented the sail on their own.
I think so.
It's not complicated to figure out.
No, I agree. It's not illogical.
No, especially since so many of these cultures, especially in South America, were coastal.
Oh, yeah.
Especially like the really big civilization types. Reed boats and rafts, along with dugout canoes and other rafts, are among the oldest known types of boats. Often used as traditional fishing boats, they are still used in a few places around the world, though they have generally been replaced with planked boats. The earliest discovered remains from a reed boat are 7,000 years old, found in Kuwait. Reed boats are depicted in early petroglyphs and were common in ancient Egypt. They were also constructed from early times in Peru and Bolivia, and boats with remarkably similar designs have been found in Easter Island, and also New Zealand, where they were made by indigenous Maori. Reed boats are still used in Peru, Bolivia, Ethiopia, and until recently in Corfu, Totora. Reeds grew in South America. Totora reeds grew in South America, particularly around Lake Titicaca and also on Easter Island. These reeds have been used by various pre-Columbian South American civilizations to build reed boats. The boats, called the balsa, vary in size from small fishing canoes to 30 meters long. They are still used on Lake Titicaca, located on the border of Peru and Bolivia, 3,810 meters above sea level. The Uros are an indigenous people predating the Incas. They live still today on man-made floating islands scattered across Lake Titicaca. These islands are also constructed from totora reeds. Each floating island supports between 3 and 10 houses, also built of reeds. The Uros still build totora reed boats, which they use for fishing and hunting seabirds.
Yeah, I've seen the floating islands. It's absolutely amazing. Like, it doesn't even look like it is.
See, and that's also interesting, not just from like that practical modern point of view. Like there's still traditional communities building these things that you can walk up and see. But it really makes me wonder, like, how many cultures did like that sort of thing, like make little like floating islands with houses on them? Because you gotta think, at least there in Lake Titicaca, if they were doing that for a few thousand years, like most of that evidence, that's going to be lost.
Exactly.
Because the island, it's going to start decaying. It's going to absorb water and decay and sink.
Yep.
So again, that's just another way of like not just building like a large boat raft thing, but another way to build your house.
True.
You build it on a floating island.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Cabalitos de Totora are reed watercraft used by fishermen in Peru for the past 3,000 years. Archaeological evidence from pottery shards. Named for the way they are ridden, straddle little reed horses in English. Fishermen use them to transport their nets and collect fish in their inner cavity. The name is not the original name, as horses were not introduced to South America until after the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire. The ancient Mochica name of the watership is Tu. They are made from the same reed, the totora, Schonoplectus californicus, subspecies totora, used by the Uru people on Lake Titicaca. Fishers have made minimal changes in the basic designs of the reed boats over the centuries. Several reed boat balsa raft expeditions have successfully crossed parts of the Pacific Ocean to demonstrate that ancient transoceanic contact was possible.
Isn't that crazy that a reed boat can do that?
Like a reed boat of all things. And here Graham is talking about like 18th century navigation and watercraft and all that. And like there's like huge like monocultures and hyper diffusionism going around the world, when right here, real archaeology, real experiments, people crossed the Pacific in a raft of all things. That's incredible. Graham should really be reading your blog.
No, because if he read my blog, he'd have to change.
Yeah, he might learn a thing or two, and he'd have to change his theory.
No, I appreciate it. As you see, I try to really put stuff in here to be convincing and can give you the information so you can actually understand.
Well, yeah, and it goes a long way because just in the past few hours, we've talked about not just dugout canoes and coastal migrations, but all sorts of different types of boating styles: rafts, birch bark canoes, composite craft, lashing multiple dugouts together.
Yep.
Yeah, and different toolkits associated with different boating styles. So yeah, it really does pay to read. It really pays to research.
And the people should understand that the great thing is I've done a lot of the research for you.
Yeah, you just have to, that's the thing, you just have to open up the blog and just read.
Hard.
The quotations are there, data points, dates, maps, diagrams.
And I put
it's laid out. Yeah, it's laid out for you. It's right there. Yeah, and the references too.
Yeah, so you can go look up more if you want to investigate what I said or where I found it.
AI overview of successful reed boat expeditions. Viracocha 2, 2003. A reed raft traveled from Chile to Easter Island. Viracocha 3, 2016-2017. A large tutorial reed boat from Chile to Australia.
Now that's crazy.
Oh yeah, going all the way to Australia. Just, like it's not like this huge metal boat. It's not even a modern fishing boat. It's just it's a raft, a tutorial reed raft made with traditional methods that had been passed down for hundreds of years.
Right.
They sailed from Chile to Australia, the entire Pacific.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that puts it lightly, at least for me. Like just the distance, that's incredible. Expedition Amana, 2023 to 2024, a 60-foot reed boat from California to Hawaii. Yeah. And seeing what's interesting is when you come up here to the Pacific Northwest, I think there is at least one oral tradition that's been talked about occasionally. That supposedly describes like a group of fishermen accidentally getting blown out to Hawaii and somehow making it back.
Yeah.
At least that's what the modern interpretation of the oral tradition is. I don't know if that's what the original one is describing. I haven't read it in a while, but it's interesting to consider.
Yeah.
That like using a dugout canoe from the Pacific Northwest, you could technically reach Hawaii.
It's wild.
Whether you have a dugout canoe in South America or North America, you can reach those Pacific islands.
Yeah. It just shows that certainly along the coast is not unreasonable. And like I said, so this is the group, remember, that's related to the Chichiban languages that I showed you before. See the Mushika is there, and then north of it, or sort of northwest, is the Xinyu. Yeah. And that is related. See, it says the Polynesians. Which is weird because look at where it's at. How did that get to the Polynesians?
Yeah. A 2020 genetics study found strong evidence of contact between Polynesians and a Native American group most closely related to Xenu people, dated to CE 1200, before settlement of Rapa Nui. Yeah, because you'd think the best evidence for Polynesian contact and genetic admixture would be the western coast.
Right.
Like, presumably Peru. Because that's where like you have all the civilizations, the urban center. But no.
That would make more sense, but we have to go with the facts, not what sounds reasonable.
Yeah, we have to go with the data that's available right now. A 2020 genetic study found strong evidence of contact between Polynesians and a Native American group most closely related to the present-day Zuni people, dated to approximately 1200 CE. Before the settlement of Rapa Nui, Easter Island. The authors proposed two explanations for the contact. Native American settlement of an eastern Pacific island followed by contact with Polynesians, or Polynesian arrival to present-day Colombia, followed by a return to an eastern Pacific island. In either case, a contact event between North Americans and Polynesians may explain the human-mediated presence of sweet potato, native to the Americas throughout Polynesia. The Sinu people of Colombia originally spoke an indigenous language, also known as Xenu or Sinu, which is part of the Chibchan linguistic family. The spiritual beliefs of the Xenu people are deeply rooted in their natural surroundings. They maintain a strong connection with the land, the rivers, and the mountains. The Xenu believe in a pantheon of deities and spirits that govern various aspects of their lives, including agriculture, hunting, and well-being. Believing in a supreme creator god named...
they believe in a supreme creator.
No, how about that? Believing in a supreme creator god named Chibchachun, they also believe in several other spirits, including the spirits of their ancestors. Rituals and ceremonies, often led by the shamans, leaders or spiritual leaders are essential in their culture, serving to maintain harmony with nature and seek blessings from the spirits. Yes,
Right.
and not only that, they don't have just one shaman, they have several.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see here, so these are maps from ancient Americas, which I know you said you watched them.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of their videos.
I added the Xinyu people and the Red Migration going from the Xinyu people of Colombia to the Marquesas Islands or whatever, because that's a possibility. So, but I liked both these because one shows where the people from Rapa Nui, the Polynesians, start off in Taiwan. And then the other map on the left-hand side, that dark blue is showing the coastal route that we knew the trading was happening in, which is like most of the Pacific coast.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that the Galapagos, they just seem to be getting ignored.
Right?
Like they're not using that as like a jumping point.
You
to
would
get
think
out
that
into the
thing would have been
Pacific.
heavily,
Yeah, like there would be at
impacted.
least like a heavy presence there.
Bizarre.
Like because you would have that chain linking the urban centers of Peru and then the western coast. They could send supplies to the Galapagos, and then from there they could head out into Pacific. But that's not what we see.
Yeah, and we got to go with the evidence. So that's the end of this video that I want to do today. So because we went from the top to the bottom.
No, we covered a lot of interesting points today.
Yeah,
and I like how we kind of all worked it together. Like we tied it back to the old copper complex, that mystery. We tied it to the Pacific Northwest. We tied it to the boats across the Americas and the different ways that these coastal communities can travel, how they can structure their society, and how it isn't always cookie cutter. There's a lot of nuance, variation.
That's something that has to be understood. Definitely,
that really has to be understood and grasped, not just by enthusiasts, but by academics equally.
I totally agree with that, because I feel like the academics, when I hear, at least when I hear them talk sometimes or read some of the stuff, I'm like, are you sure you know what a chieftain can be limited to? Because
I've thought the same with some of the stuff I've read too.
So, like I told you, I want to present the evidence, and then people can choose to believe what they want. But I feel like I'm on a strong footing saying that a lot of the conceptions, including academics, of chieftains is just not accurate to the real portrayal and ethnography of cultures.
Yeah, no, and it's like I told David Pompiani. Not enough people are pushing against these old frameworks, and we need a lot more of that. Because
I appreciate it, and you brought up that I was one of the first people to say that.
Well, I had to. No, because when I really started digging my heels in with the OCC and the North America's Archaic, I needed somebody to ask who was familiar with all sorts of different social structures.
Right.
And you're the first person that came to mind.
Yeah, and I think what people don't understand too is that even though like some people think, because I'm an atheist, I only focus on religion. Yeah, but I'm also an anarchist. Because I'm an anarchist, how groups throughout history have socially, come together and organize themselves really interests me in a way that just as an atheist it wouldn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I really want to know, like, when did people start having this imbalance of power? When what was it like when that happened? Not just guess, but to really understand. So I really have a desire to understand that. And then also it's important to me because the more that I understand, culture as a large thing, the more I can see what possible ideas we could have for a future that don't have to be, because I'm not the kind of, like, some anarchists will just list people in the 17 or 1800s or 1900s, their ideas, and that somehow that those are the ones we should follow. I'm not saying that some of those aren't good ideas, but I know a lot more about culture than they did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Across the world, what's worked, what's not.
A lot more about culture than the philosophers in the 1700s, or
absolutely.
Even
if they're brilliant,
knowing about.
Even if they're brilliant,
that's the incredible thing. I mean, some of them have like really good ideas, but we've learned so much since the 1700s that it really seems foolish to me just to keep returning to philosophy developed for a 1700s world.
I completely agree. Because even also sometimes people don't, just like you were talking about forgetting. The anarchists do it less than some other groups. I will say, because like socialists I've experienced are way more resistant to saying that their people ever did anything bad, or they make excuses. Well, they did it bad because A, B, C, D. Anarchists do this less, but anarchists still do this. Like one of the heroes to me in a sense is McCall Balkin, and he was great. He said women should be equal back when no one was saying that. In a sense, but certainly no male was saying that. And he saw that race needed to be addressed, where the first anarchist, Pierre Pardon, he says that it basically should be white people and men. So, and yet McCall Balkin, right, which he's considered like the father of collectivist anarchism, he felt the Jews needed to be completely eliminated. He sounds like a Nazi.
That sounds straight from fucking.
So I'm making a point that you can't look at these people and then just, like you said about, there's a younger burial, but let's not just look at it. To me, you can't do that. You need to look at everything and go, okay, so yeah, let's put it in context. And then there's another person who's considered the father of communist anarchism, and some of the things he said about Africans in Africa sounds racist as shit too. So he said nice things about women and nice things about some places, sounds great and everything, until he gets to, he's like, well, those people though. I'm like, what the fuck? That's what I was just saying is that, but in my perspective, where I have this whole world perspective and try to apply my thinking of that everyone's equal, not in some limited cultural way that, like I said, and you agree, the people in these other times, they were in times where people were a lot more limited. Yeah. And racism, bigotry of all kinds was way more rampant. So I try not to do that. I try to have a perspective. I'm no different than anyone else. Everybody matters. Just like someone said, like certain people are brilliant. I think a lot more people are brilliant. Our culture doesn't really favor people, experimenting with their brilliance. People that don't have wealth get trapped in jobs where they don't get to do anything else but just survive. And like I know you had talked about before, after you get off work, do you really think about doing philosophy or taking a nap? Or getting, intoxicated just to relax or whatever. Our society is not really set up except for people that are born into wealth or somehow gifted wealth, and whether, what other way that happens, to then have the privilege to feel like they can do it. So I feel like we don't even know the quality of what people could achieve because so many people are oppressed.
No, and that's the really unfortunate thing, that our society isn't really fine-tuned and structured to accommodate stuff like what we're doing now.
Right.
And not only that, those accommodations are being removed because interest at universities in like the classics and even like introductory philosophy, like I couldn't even get my philosophy minor at my local university because they had stopped offering logic classes. Wow. I had to learn logic on my own. Wow. Yeah, and I couldn't get a philosophy degree because interest had fallen that much. And that's the way it's becoming across the country. It's interest in philosophy, interest in the classics, how the Greeks structured philosophy. Not only that, just like sociology, history in general. People are losing interest.
Well, I appreciate, you helping me do this stuff and your interest and everything. And I think it's important. And I feel like
it is.
That we're doing good stuff. And if people would only look at the blogs and look at the videos, they would be able to be so much more expanded in their thinking.
Oh, we need it too. The world really needs it.
I agree. Well, go ahead and tell people where to find you, and then we'll end the video.
Okay, everybody, you can find me on X. That's the main place I'm posting right now. I go by CopperViolette on X. My profile picture is a little almond with like this light blue mask, like a knight helmet almost. That's where you can find me. I'll post little snippets like images, quotations. Sometimes I'll post my thoughts about something I'm currently researching on. Aside from that, you can find me on Facebook. I go by Dylan Violette on there. Picture of a guy holding a little baby black lab. If you have like any questions, like personal questions or anything like that about what I'm researching, or thoughts about an episode or something, you can reach out to me there, or you can reach out to me on X. For Facebook, I post on the Old Copper Complex and Ancient Waterways America Facebook group, and also the Mesquabic Facebook. Those are both the open groups. They're free to join. You're mostly going to to find stuff there about Native American copper. Aside from X and Facebook, I also post on Reddit occasionally, mainly the Ancient Americas subreddit. That group is dedicated to the YouTube channel. It's a fan page. And again, on there, I go by CopperViolette. I have an academia.edu page. Not posting much there right now, but if you want to reach out to me there, you can also blue squiggly lines on a black background with geometric copper colored shapes. That's my account. I go by Dylan Violette on there. Or you can always reach me at copperviolet.gmail.com. copperviolet@gmail.com.
Right on.
Yeah.
So next video we're going to do is going to be on mythology again. And this one is kind of I would say almost a mix of mythology and archaeology, sort of. It's on weaving in mythology. Spider grandmother, women, rarely is it a spider grandfather or man, and then often related with moon deities or wise, intelligent creator, crafters, and indigenous beliefs in the Americas as well as around the world that relate to weaving in mythology.
Yeah, and I'll have to send you some info on that because we have a lot of copper and bone sewing needles from the archaic. Not only that, but some preserved fragments and impressions on different tools. So we have evidence for the stuff that they were doing. I'll send you some of that.
Very cool.
Yep.
Yeah, you should read the blog too. It's long, but I got a lot of really good stuff in there. And then the next one after that, we'll be going back and forth. So we'll be going back to doing an archaeology or a history one. And so that we're going to do it on European slavery in Florida by the Spanish in a sense, 1520. That was before the British colonial slavery of 1526 in North. Just to give you the updates of what the next two videos is going to be about. All right. Well, I had fun. Take care.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. See you next time.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie AtHope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist-humanist philosopher and prehistorical writer-researcher at DamienMarieAtHope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument-driven apatheism, ignosticism, atheism, anti-theism, anti-religionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity, I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion.